My name's Colby Renteria. I'm from the backside of Nocona by the grain bins, and I work as a water meter reader. Listen, I know how that sounds, like I'm about to tell you some made-up story to mess with you. But I'm not. I'm not an author. I'm not trying to be clever. I'm telling you what happened because I can't keep it inside my head anymore, and it keeps replaying when I try to sleep, and I keep checking my own boots like they're going to confess something to me. It was a Tuesday, December. One of those mornings in North Texas where the cold is mean, but it doesn't have any snow with it. Just that white hard frost like sugar on everything, and the sky stays pale, like it forgot how to be blue. I remember exactly what I had because I've played the beginning back so many times trying to find where it first went wrong. I ate 2 fried eggs on toast, and I drank coffee that tasted burnt because I left it on the warmer too long while I was looking for my other glove. I wore my brown work shirt with the stitched patch on the chest, and the collar had that dark stain on the inside from years of sweat and dust. And there was a tiny smear of yellow paint on the left sleeve that I never could get out since the summer when we repainted the porch rail at my aunt's place. That stain matters to me now, dude, because it's proof I was wearing that shirt that day. Proof it was a real morning and not some bad dream. I punched in at 6:11 on the dot because I remember the clock in the office was running fast again, and my supervisor had been fussing about it. And he wrote on a sticky note that said, "Do not set this clock back." And it was crooked and hanging off the side of the frame. I grabbed my route sheets, the handheld reader, a fresh pencil, and my thermos. I remember the smell of the office, that mix of old carpet and copier heat, and the lemon cleaner they use on the counter. I remember the hum of the soda machine in the hallway. So normal it hurts to think about it. My route that morning had a little pocket outside town, a few streets that start paved and then turn to chip seal, and then to that packed dirt that looks like it's been ironed flat. There's a cemetery out there. A small one. Not the big one with the fancy headstones near the highway, but the older one tucked behind a line of cedar and hackberry trees. The gate is usually locked because people kept dumping trash, and someone once tried to pull the brass vase off a marker, and after that the family association put a chain on it. The meters I read are on the county line along those back roads, little boxes by fence posts, and then I swing back through a trailer park and a couple of older houses that still use the original meter pits. My job is simple. I get in the truck, I drive, I lift lids, I read numbers, I log them, I close lids, I keep moving. It's steady. It's quiet. It's the kind of work where your mind wanders, and you think about bills, and you think about what you're going to eat for dinner, and you think about nothing at all. That's why what happened messed me up so bad. There wasn't supposed to be room for something like that in a day like that. The frost made the grass look like it had been painted white, and even the dirt on the shoulder had that crunchy glitter to it. The heater in my truck takes a while, so my breath was still fogging the windshield a little when I turned onto the first back road. I remember the sound my tires made over the frost on the gravel, that soft crackle. And I remember thinking, man, it's colder than it should be for this part of December. I remember I passed a pasture where 2 cows were standing dead still, facing the same direction like they were watching something. I remember that because it made me laugh, like they were lined up for a picture. I drove another mile and I turned left where the road narrows and the cedar trees start crowding in. That's when I saw the footprints. They were on the shoulder at first, not in the road. And I only noticed because the frost was perfect and smooth everywhere else, like a blank page. And then there were these clear oval prints cutting through it. Human footprints. Not animal, not tire tracks. Just a line of them, one after another, heading the same way I was driving. I slowed down without even thinking. I told myself it was a jogger. Some people do that. Some people are wired wrong, and they like cold mornings. But these prints weren't like jogging prints. You know what I mean? They weren't scattered. They were too even. Heel, toe, heel, toe. Spaced the same like a machine stamping them. And the weirdest part was how fresh they looked. The frost was intact everywhere else, so those prints had to have been made after the frost settled. That means whoever made them was out there before sunrise, walking that shoulder where there aren't streetlights, where there aren't houses close enough to watch you, where the trees lean over like they're trying to listen. I remember my skin got tight on my arms even before I had a reason. I kept driving, slow, and the footprints stayed with me. They didn't drift into the grass like someone stepping off the road. They didn't cross to the other side. They just kept going straight ahead like they had a destination. I checked my mirror and I could still see them behind me. A clean white line cut by dark ovals. I told myself again, it's a person. People walk. There is nothing strange about prints in frost. But my brain did that thing where it starts collecting details, like it's building a case. The prints looked like bare shoe tread, no fancy pattern, just the shape of a regular boot sole, work boots. The kind I wear, the kind half the men in town wear. That should have made it less strange, but it made it worse. I pulled over at my first stop, a meter box by a fence line. I got out and the cold hit my face hard enough to sting my teeth. The grass cracked under my boots. I lifted the lid, read the numbers, punched it into the handheld. I did it on autopilot because my eyes kept going back to the shoulder, to those footprints continuing past me. Dude, I stood there with the meter lid in my hand and I watched the prints like they were going to move. I don't know why. I just did. I shut the lid, walked back to my truck, and I swear to God I almost stepped into one of the prints to compare size, like some kind of idiot detective. I stopped myself because that felt wrong in a way I can't explain. Like I'd be joining something. I got back in the truck and drove to the next stop. The footprints were still there. Same spacing, same direction. Not a second set. Not a dog track beside them. Nothing else. It was like one person had walked through a world that didn't touch anything else. After a couple more stops, I started talking out loud, which I do sometimes anyway, but this was different. I said, okay, somebody's messing around. I said, maybe the cemetery gate got left open and somebody walked from there. I said, maybe it's a worker going to check fences. Then I realized where the footprints were leading. They weren't just going down the road forever. They were angling toward the cemetery entrance. There's a dirt pull-off where the gate is, and the chain is usually wrapped tight. The prints were going right toward that pull-off. I slowed down so much my truck almost crawled. The frost was thickest there because the trees blocked the early light, so the prints looked even sharper. And then they did something that made my stomach drop. They left the road. They turned perfectly and went straight to the gate, not wandering, straight there. And then they went under it. That is the only way I can say it. The gate sits low, with a metal bar at the bottom, maybe 6 inches off the ground. The prints went up to that bar and then continued on the other side, inside the cemetery. No gap, no scuff where someone would crouch or step over, no smear where someone would drag their foot. Just prints that reached the bar and then prints that continued inside as if the bar wasn't there. I parked on the shoulder without even pulling fully into the dirt, like I wanted my truck aimed back out. My hands were tight on the steering wheel. I stared at the gate. It was chained. I could see the chain. I could see the padlock. I could see frost on the top rail like a white line. The cemetery was quiet. No birds, no wind, just that dead, cold stillness. And those prints went inside. I sat there for a full minute, maybe more, just staring, and my brain kept trying to solve it in regular ways. I told myself maybe the gate wasn't locked last night and someone walked in and then someone locked it after, but that wouldn't make the prints pass under the bar so clean. I told myself maybe there was another entrance. There is a gap in the fence line farther down, an old spot where a tree fell years ago and they patched it, but the prints didn't go there. They went to the gate like it was the front door of a house. I remember, I whispered, "What are you doing?" Like I was talking to the person who made them. I did not get out right away. I should have driven on. I should have done my job and left that gate alone. But I had this stupid need to understand. It felt like if I didn't look, the question would follow me the rest of the day. So I got out. The cold hit harder than before because my body was already tense. My boots crunched on the frost. I walked toward the gate slow, like I expected someone to step out from behind a headstone and ask what I was doing. When I got close, I knelt down and I looked at the prints right at the bar. Dude, they were perfect. The edges of the tread were crisp, and the prints inside the cemetery were the same, continuing in a straight line toward the center where the older graves are. I reached out and touched the chain. It was cold enough to burn my finger. It was tight. The lock was locked. I jiggled it just a little, and it didn't give. I stood up and looked around like maybe someone was watching me from the trees. Nothing. Just those prints leading in. My breath sounded loud in my own ears. I said, "Listen, this is nothing, and I don't even know who I was saying it to." Then I did something I regret. I climbed the gate. It's not tall, but it's awkward, and my boots slipped a little on the frosted rail. I remember my heart thumping because I felt like I was doing something wrong, like trespassing, even though I wasn't there to damage anything. I swung my leg over and dropped inside. When my boots hit the ground, the frost cracked under them, and that sound in that quiet place was like breaking glass. I looked down immediately at the prints, and then at my own. My prints were bigger, wider. The tread on my boot left a different pattern. Good. That was good. That meant I wasn't looking at my own tracks somehow. I told myself that like it mattered. I followed the prints. I know, dude. I know you would say do not do that. But I did. The path went between rows of graves, some with stones, some just with sunken rectangles where the ground had settled. The frost made the low spots show up more. The prints did not step on any markers. They did not wander. They kept a respectful line as if whoever made them knew exactly where the graves were. That detail did not comfort me. That detail made my scalp feel tight. I remember a small cedar branch moved slightly, just a tiny shake, and I snapped my head toward it so fast my neck hurt. But it was only a branch settling. I kept walking. The deeper I went, the quieter it got, like the sound of the road fell away, like I was underwater. My breath kept puffing in front of me. I could smell cold earth and old leaves, and then I saw the open grave. It was near the back where the oldest stones are, the ones with the writing worn down. The grave was open like someone had been digging. Fresh dirt piled on one side, dark against the frost. The hole was clean, straight edges, like it was dug with equipment or at least by someone who knew what they were doing. But there were no tool marks around it, no shovel stuck in the dirt, no wheelbarrow tracks, no tire ruts, just that one line of footprints leading straight to the edge of the open grave. And then they stopped. The prints ended at the lip, toes pointing toward the hole. There was not a single print leaving, not one. Not stepping aside, just a straight line that ended at the grave, as if the person had stepped into it and never stepped out. I stood there, maybe 8 feet away, frozen in a way that had nothing to do with the cold. My brain tried to do the math. If someone stepped in, there would be a disturbed edge, a crumble of dirt, something. But the edge was sharp. And if someone climbed out, there would be hand marks or scuffs, or at least prints leaving. Nothing. The frost around the grave was untouched except for the prints leading in. I remember I could hear my own heartbeat, and it made my ears feel full. I remember I whispered, "No, no, no," but not loud, like if I spoke louder, something would answer. I took one step forward, then another, until I was close enough to see into the hole. I did not want to. The hole was deep, deeper than a person's height. The bottom was dark. I couldn't see a coffin. I couldn't see anything except a rectangle of earth cut out of the world. And then I heard something that made my whole body lock. A sound from down there, not a voice, not a scream. A slow, steady scuff, like the sole of a boot dragging over dirt. One scuff, then a pause. then another, like someone walking in place in the dark. I leaned forward without meaning to, and the cold air from the hole came up and hit my face. It didn't smell like fresh dirt. It smelled like old damp, like a closed room that hasn't been opened in years. My stomach turned hard. The scuffing stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. I stood there, staring into that dark, and I realized something that made my hands go numb. The prints leading to the grave were the same size as mine. Not close. The same. The shape, the length, the width. I had not noticed that before because I was focused on pattern differences. But standing at the edge, looking down, I saw one of the last prints clearly, and it matched my boot size, like someone wearing my boots had walked there. I took my foot and put it next to the print without stepping into it, and it lined up. Dude, I felt my mind split. Part of me said, that's impossible. Lots of boots are the same size. Stop doing this. Another part of me said, you did this. You walked here. You just don't remember. And that thought hit me so hard, I actually swayed. I grabbed my own thigh with one hand like I needed to hold on to myself. I tried to think back to the office, to breakfast, to the drive, and everything was there. But it was like a film I had watched. Not something I lived. I remember I said, wait, I forgot to tell you. And I was alone. I wasn't talking to anyone. I was just losing my grip. Then I heard it again. The scuff in the hole, closer this time, like it was right under the edge. I backed up fast, and my boot slipped on frost and I almost fell. The sound stopped immediately, like it was reacting. I stood there, shaking. I didn't want to look down again. Not with eyes I could see, just the certainty of it, like stepping into a room and knowing someone is behind a door. I said, I'm leaving, and I meant it. I turned around and I started walking back along the prints, trying to place my feet away from them like they were a trap. I kept my eyes scanning the rows of stones, the trees, the fence line. I expected movement. I expected a person to appear and ask me what I was doing. Nothing moved. The cemetery stayed dead. When I got halfway back, I realized my truck keys weren't in my pocket. That is the moment I felt actual panic, clean panic, like an animal. I stopped and patted my pants. Left pocket, right pocket, jacket pocket, nothing. My keys were gone. I remember my hands started shaking so bad I couldn't even check the pockets right. I told myself I left them in the truck. I always leave them in the ignition sometimes. But then I remembered I had locked my truck when I climbed the gate. Out of habit, because I didn't want someone to walk by and hop in. I remember very clearly hearing the door lock click when I pushed it, which meant I had my keys in my hand then, which meant my keys should have been in my pocket now. I stood there in that quiet place and I tried to think. Maybe I dropped them by the gate. Maybe they fell out when I climbed. I turned and hurried back toward the gate, my breath coming fast, my boots crunching. And as I walked, I saw something that made my throat tighten. There was a second line of footprints now. Not beside the first, behind me, following my path back from the grave. Fresh prints in frost that had not been there when I walked in. And they were not my boot tread. They were the same plain sole as the first set, the ones that matched my size, and they were placed in the same perfect spacing, like whatever made the first line had made another line in the time I was standing there. Without me hearing it, without me seeing it, I stopped so hard my knees jolted. I stared at the new prints. They came from the direction of the grave. They followed toward me. They stopped about 10 feet behind where I was standing, toes pointed at me. They were just there, crisp, like a statement. My body went cold in a different way. I could not move for a second. I felt watched from the ground itself. Then I heard the scuffing again, not from the grave now, from somewhere behind the stones, like a boot sole dragging over frozen grass. One scuff, pause, another, not fast, not running, calm. like somebody taking their time. I did not look for what was making it. I ran. I ran toward the gate like my life depended on it. Because in that moment, dude, it did. My boots slipped and skated on the frost. My breath burned my throat. My heart hammered so hard it made my vision pulse. I reached the gate and I grabbed the top rail and I hauled myself up, not caring if I tore my pants. My boot caught the chain and I almost went down. But I shoved and got over, and I dropped on the other side hard enough to jar my spine. I scrambled to my feet and ran to my truck. The door was locked. I pounded my pockets again. No keys. I looked through the window and my keys were hanging from the ignition. Hanging. Like I had never taken them out. Like I had never locked the door. I grabbed the handle and pulled. It opened. The door was unlocked. I stood there for a half second, staring at it, confused. And then I shoved myself in and slammed the door and turned the key, even though it was already there. The engine started on the first crank. The radio was on low, some morning talk, and the normal sound of it in that moment felt wrong. Like the world was pretending nothing happened. I threw the truck into gear and backed up so fast gravel flew. I did not look back at the cemetery. I drove away with my shoulders up around my ears, my hands sweating on the wheel. I kept checking my mirrors. Nothing followed. The road stretched out empty, but the frost on the shoulder showed something for a long time. The footprints. The original line still running along the edge. And then, I swear to God, I saw another line appear. Not step by step like someone walking. Just there, when my headlights hit the right angle. Like a film developing. A second set, then a third. Parallel lines. All the same spacing. All heading the same direction toward the cemetery. I blinked hard. I leaned forward. My chest tightened. I told myself my headlights were playing tricks. But the lines were too clear. I drove faster. And as I did, those lines stayed with me for longer than they should have. Like the road was repeating itself. I passed the same mailbox twice. I saw the same crooked fence post twice. I know that sounds like I'm losing it, but I am telling you what I remember. And I remember thinking, no, wait, that wasn't when it started. It was earlier when I first saw the cows standing still, because now it felt like the whole morning was sliding out of order. I looked at the clock on my dash. It said 7:04. I had been on my route less than an hour. That made sense. Then I blinked and looked again and it said 7:04 again. Exactly. Like the minutes weren't moving. I shook my wrist like my watch would tell me something, but I wasn't wearing a watch that day because the band broke. I remember that too. I drove back toward town, and the closer I got, the more normal things looked. Like the world was snapping back into place. Houses. A dog in a yard. A pickup parked crooked in a driveway. Frost melting in patches where the sun finally touched it. I pulled into the next stop and I tried to do my job. My hands were shaking so bad I mistyped and had to correct it. I told myself, finish your route. Do not make a big deal. Do not sound crazy. Then my handheld beeped and flashed a warning I had never seen before. It said duplicate entry and it listed the meter I was at. I had not entered it twice. I had just lifted the lid, but the device was telling me I already recorded it. The meter number was crossed out already in pencil. I felt my knees go weak. I looked around the yard, the road, the empty field beyond. I said, no, out loud, and the sound of my voice surprised me because it was thin. I flipped back through the handheld history. There it was, the same meter recorded at 6:52, recorded by me, according to the device. Climbing that cemetery gate. But now the record said I was here, reading this meter, writing on my sheet. I sat down on my truck bumper and I tried to breathe. I tried to line up the time in my head. It wouldn't line up. It felt like trying to stack wet cards. I called my supervisor. I did not tell him about the grave. I did not tell him about the prints. I told him my handheld was acting weird, showing duplicate entries. He sighed like he was tired already and said, "Bring it back later. Just keep going and write it down if it acts up again." His voice sounded normal. That should have helped. It didn't. I kept working. But every few stops, the handheld would flash duplicate entry, and my sheet would already have a line through a meter I had not read yet. Sometimes the numbers in the device were different from what I was seeing in the pit, like the meter had changed while I wasn't looking. I started to feel like I was walking behind myself, like my day had already happened and I was just catching up. I started checking the ground near every stop for prints in frost. I saw them twice. Not always. Twice. A neat line of boot prints leading away from a meter pit into a yard and then stopping at a fence. No return. I did not follow them. I did not even get close. I finished the route as fast as I could, skipping anything that felt off, telling myself I'd come back later. When I got back to the office, it was 10:18, and the sun was bright enough to melt most of the frost, and everything looked normal again, like I had imagined the cold morning. I walked inside and the carpet smell hit me, and the soda machine hummed, and it was the same as always. I handed the handheld to my supervisor, and I said, "It's acting up," and he plugged it in and frowned at the screen. He said, "Why does it show you starting your route at 5:37? I stared at him. I said, "No, I punched in at 6:11. He pointed at the screen. It showed my login at 5:37. It showed meters recorded before sunrise. Meters I had not gone to. Meters across town. It was all in my name. My supervisor looked at me like he was trying to decide if I was joking. I told him I must have hit something wrong. He said, "It doesn't do that by itself." He said, "Did you lend your handheld to anyone?" I said no. I could feel my face going numb. He said, "You look pale." He asked if I was sick. I told him I didn't sleep good. That was true, even though the night before was fine. I told him I was going to sit in my truck for a minute. He said, "Okay, just do not drive if you're dizzy." I walked out, and as I crossed the lot, I saw frost still clinging in the shade along the fence line. And in that frost, right by my truck tire, there were boot prints. One line, plain sole, perfect spacing, leading from my passenger door toward the back gate of the yard, straight as a ruler. I looked around to see if anyone was watching. A coworker was loading cones into another truck, not looking at me. The office lady was walking in with a bag, talking on her phone. Normal. I looked back at the prints. They were right there. I did not make them. I had walked from the office to my truck in the middle of the lot where there was no frost. But these prints were in the shade, like they waited where frost stayed, like they knew where they could show up. I got in my truck and locked the doors. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, breathing too fast. I did not start the engine. I just sat. Then my phone buzzed. It was a missed call from a number I didn't recognize. No voicemail. A minute later, it buzzed again. Same number. I answered because my hands were already shaking, and I needed something real to focus on. There was silence, but not normal silence, like someone on the line. It sounded like cold air. Then I heard a slow scuff, like a boot sole dragging on dirt. One scuff. Pause. Another. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might throw up. I said, "Who is this?" No answer. The scuffing continued. Steady. Calm. Like somebody pacing in a small space. I hung up. My hands were numb. I looked down at my boots. I looked at the tread. I tried to tell myself it was coincidence. Then I realized my boots were cleaner than they should have been. I had been out all morning, lifting lids, stepping in damp pits, walking shoulders. My boots should have had mud. They were clean, like I had just put them on. That detail broke something in me. I drove home early, I told my supervisor I felt sick, and he waved me off. On the drive home, I kept checking the clock. The minutes moved, but sometimes they would jump, like I would be at 10:42 and then look again and it would be 11:09 and I would not remember the stretch between. I got home and I walked inside and my house felt wrong. Not haunted, just wrong. Like I had moved things and forgotten. My kitchen chair was angled toward the hallway. I never leave it like that. My sink faucet was dripping even though I always shut it tight. My work shirt had a smear of dark dirt on the hem, fresh, like it had brushed wet soil. I did not remember getting that dirt. I took the shirt off and I held it up and stared at it like it could explain. I washed my hands 3 times. I scrubbed under my nails until my fingers stung. I could still smell that damp old air from the grave in my nose. That night I tried to sleep, and I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the line of prints ending at the open hole. I kept hearing the scuffing. Around midnight, I got up and checked my front porch. Frost had started again in patches on the grass. I stood on the porch in my socks and looked out at my yard. There were footprints. Not mine. Plain sole. Perfect spacing. They started at my fence line, and they came straight across my yard to the base of my porch steps. And they stopped. Toes pointed at my door. No return. I did not open the door. I did not step onto the grass. I stood there holding my breath, listening. No wind, no dog barking, nothing. I went back inside and I locked every lock even though they were already locked. I sat in my living room with the lights on until morning. When the sun came up, the frost melted and the prints were gone. But the grass where they had been was pressed down, like the ground remembered. The next day, I called in sick. The day after that, I tried to go back to work because I needed the money and I needed to pretend I was normal. I told myself it was stress. I told myself it was a glitch and a weird morning and my mind trying to connect things. I got in my truck before sunrise again, and I drove toward my route. I tried to avoid the cemetery road. I took a different turn, and I still found footprints in frost, right where the shade held it. Plain sole, perfect spacing, leading the direction I was going. I pulled over and I just sat there with my hands on the wheel and my chest tight. I said, "Listen," out loud. "Listen, I'm telling you, I'm not doing this. I'm not following. I'm not going." And I swear to God the prints changed. They did not disappear. They did not multiply. They simply turned. A perfect angle, like somebody had pivoted on a heel, and now they pointed back the way I came, like they were telling me to go. I stared at them until my eyes watered. Then I turned my truck around and drove back to town. And the feeling of relief that hit me was immediate and sick, like I had obeyed something. That was when I knew it wasn't a one-time thing. I quit that job within 2 weeks. I didn't make a scene. I told them my back was acting up. I said I needed something closer to home. My supervisor shrugged and said, "Okay." He did not argue. He did not ask why. I looked exhausted. Maybe he didn't want to know. I tried other work. I did a few weeks at a warehouse. I did some odd jobs. I tried to live normal, but the problem is the frost. Anytime the mornings get cold enough, anytime the world turns white and smooth, I start looking for prints, and I find them more often than I should. Not always leading to a cemetery, but always leading somewhere. Sometimes to the back door of a closed diner that hasn't been open in years. Sometimes to an empty lot where nothing is built but the grass is always shorter, like something lays there. Once, I found a line leading to my own shed, and the padlock was still locked, and the prints went right up to it and stopped like they were waiting for me to open it. I didn't. I left the shed alone for months. When I finally opened it in spring, nothing inside was stolen, but my toolbox had been moved 6 inches to the left, like somebody had stood there and needed space to stand. There are 3 days I can't account for from last winter. 3 days where my phone shows calls made that I do not remember, where my calendar has notes in my handwriting that I do not remember writing. Simple notes like check, gate, and do not go in. One of them just says open. I don't know what it means. I flinch now when I hear a boot scuff on a concrete floor, like at the grocery store when someone drags their heel. It hits my spine like a jolt. I don't go near that cemetery. I don't drive that road if there's frost on the ground. I have changed routes home to avoid shaded stretches where the frost sits longer. I sound crazy saying that. I know I do, but listen, man. I am not telling you I saw a monster. I am not telling you I saw a ghost. I am telling you I saw evidence that behaved like it had a mind. I am telling you there were footsteps that went through a locked gate without disturbing the frost, and they led to an open grave, and they stopped like something stepped down into the dark and never needed to step out. And I am telling you that ever since then, on cold mornings, the ground keeps offering me the same invitation in different places. The same perfect spacing. The same plain soul. Like a pattern it can repeat whenever it wants. I have tried to ignore it. I have tried to laugh at it. I have tried to tell myself it's kids, or hunters, or my imagination. But the worst part is not the prints themselves. The worst part is what it does to my memory. Because now I don't fully trust the order of my own days. I don't fully trust that when I remember eating breakfast and putting on my work shirt and punching in, that it happened in the way I think it did. Sometimes I catch myself staring at that yellow paint smear on my sleeve like it's a timestamp, like it's a receipt, like it's the only way I can prove I was there. And when the weather gets cold and the mornings turn white, I don't sleep. I lie there and I listen for any sound on my porch. Not a knock, not a voice, just that slow scuff, pause, scuff, like somebody taking their time right outside sight, like somebody pacing where the frost can hold it, waiting for the ground to be blank enough to write on again. My name's Colton Rigsby. I'm from the back end of Little Elm, and I work as a service tech for a small electrical outfit that mostly does shut-off follow-ups and no power calls for the property managers that don't want to wait on anybody else. Listen, I'm behind my trailer right now because I cannot sit inside with the lights off. I'm telling you, I cannot. And my phone screen is cracked right down the middle, so if my words jump around, that's why. And it is after 3 in the morning, and I have not slept since the first night it happened. I need you to understand this started as normal gets, like boring normal. Like I still remember what I ate because I was thinking about money and gas and how my truck was pulling a little to the right. That morning I poured the last of the cheap cereal into a bowl, the kind that turns the milk gray, and I ate it standing up because my kitchen chair has one leg that rocks. I had on a faded gray work shirt with our company name stitched on the chest, and I had a brown coffee stain on the left sleeve from leaning on the counter while the pot sputtered. I remember it because that stain is still there, and it is not from coffee anymore. It is from what I touched later, and it will not wash out. I swear to God, it will not. I punched in at 7:11 a.m. on the time clock app. Then I drove north with the sun low and white, that winter light that makes everything look flat and too clean. The dispatch text came in while I was at a red light. No power confirmed. House vacant. Manager requests inspection. Possible illegal reconnect. Address in Frisco area. Holiday decor noted. I did not think anything about the holiday part except that it meant somebody left junk behind and I would have to step over it. It's December. Everybody's got lights and inflatables and those plastic candles in windows. I'm telling you, in my head, this was just another vacant house with a lockbox and a manager that thinks every flicker is a crime. I drove out there, North Texas suburb streets, all the same stone fronts, all the same little trees planted at the curb. And the only difference is which house has a wreath and which one has a package sitting on the porch. The address was at the end of a cul-de-sac, and the street sign was bent like somebody backed into it last year. There was a little retention pond behind the back fence line, and you could see the dead grass around it, that pale straw color. The house itself looked normal too. Tan brick, dark shingles, 2-car garage, and in the front flower bed the mulch was still that red dyed kind. too bright for winter. The electric meter was on the right side like always. There was a lockbox on the front handle with the manager code. And there were Christmas lights up along the roofline. White ones, the small kind, clipped, tidy. There was also a plastic deer in the yard, the wire frame kind, and it was unplugged. The cord just coiled near the porch. I walked around to the meter first because that is what I do, and the meter had the tag from the utility shutoff verified. I put my tester on the service line. Nothing. Dead. I opened the panel at the side, checked it. Nothing. The house was cold and quiet in that way. Vacant houses are. You can feel it even before you step inside. Like the air is holding still because nobody is moving through it. I called the property manager, a woman named Denise, and I told her, power is off at the meter, looks legit, no sign of tamper. She goes, the neighbor said lights come on every night, like the whole roofline. They said it's been happening since the cutoff. I laughed because that sounds like neighbor nonsense, and I said, probably another house, probably reflections. And she got sharp and said, it's this address, please go inside. Please verify no backfeed, no generator. So I went to the porch and I put in the code and the lockbox popped open, and when I grabbed the key, it felt warm. Not sun warm. It was winter and the porch was shaded. It felt like it had been in somebody's pocket. I remember that because I stopped and looked at my hand like I'd imagined it. I did that thing where you check yourself like, okay, you're being weird, it's a key, it is metal, maybe it sat in the lockbox in the sun earlier. But the lockbox was cold, the handle was cold, the key was warm. I swear to God. I opened the door and the house smelled like old air and faint pine, like somebody had used a cheap candle and it soaked into the drywall. The carpet was clean. No furniture, no pictures, no trash. The only thing in the whole living room was a little plastic storage tote near the fireplace, and the lid was off like somebody forgot to close it. Inside it were strings of lights, tangled, more white lights. I'm telling you, if you've ever been in a vacant place, you can hear your own boots too loud. And that's what it was. My boots on the tile in the entryway, and the sound went farther than it should have, like the house was bigger than it looked from outside. I checked the breaker panel inside. All switches off. I checked outlets with the tester, dead. I checked the garage, empty. There was no generator. There was no extension cord from a neighbor. There was no battery pack. Nothing. Just those lights outside and those lights in the tote like a nest. I walked back into the living room and I noticed the back door blinds were down, but not all the way, like an inch of space at the bottom. And that bothered me because vacant houses are usually sealed up tight. I leaned and looked through the gap, and the backyard was empty. Fence line, some winter weeds, the pond beyond, nothing. Then I heard it, and I'm gonna tell you this part careful because it sounds dumb, but it is the part that made my stomach drop before I knew why. I heard a soft clicking, like a small relay switching, like when a thermostat tells something to kick on. Click. Pause. Click. It came from above me, like the attic space. I stood still and listened. And the clicking happened again. Same spacing, like a pattern. 3 clicks. Pause. 3 clicks. Pause. I said out loud, because I do that sometimes when I'm alone. I said, probably the alarm box, even though I did not see an alarm keypad anywhere. I walked toward the hallway and the clicking stopped. When I stopped walking, it started again. Wait, no. That wasn't the first time it did that. It had already done it once earlier, when I came in and I ignored it. I forgot to tell you that because my brain is skipping. But it's important. The first time I heard it, I was at the breaker panel and I thought it was my own tools shifting. The second time, it felt like it was responding to me. I went into the kitchen, checked under the sink. No hidden inverter, no battery system. The refrigerator space was empty. just the outlet behind it. Dead. I opened the pantry. Empty. Then I saw the calendar, still hanging on a nail by the breakfast nook, and it was on December. There were no markings, no notes, just the picture of a snowy cabin and the month grid. That made me pause because somebody left it like that. Like they stopped mid-year and never took it down. Then, I noticed something else that should not have mattered, but it did. The minute hand on the little wall clock above the doorway was missing. The clock face was there. The hour hand was there. But the minute hand was gone. And the clock was not moving because there was no power, and it was not a battery one. It had that old plug-in cord dangling behind it. I shook it off, and I finished the inspection. I texted Denise. Inside confirms no power, no generator, no backfeed, breakers off. She texts back. So why do the lights turn on? I texted. Maybe neighbor mistaken. She texted. They sent a video. I did not have good signal inside, so I stepped onto the porch to watch it. The video was shaky, filmed from a driveway across the street, and you could see this house. Dark. Then at exactly the same moment, the roofline lights blinked on. Solid, bright, clean white, no flicker, no half-power glow, full. Then, after a while, they blinked off. The timestamp in the corner said 6:02 p.m. The neighbor voice in the video says, "There it is again." That is what he said. Again. Like it was routine. I stood there on the porch in the daytime, looking at the lights that were currently off, and I looked down at the cord that fed them. It was clipped along the trim, ran down toward the garage side, and disappeared behind a shrub. I followed it. It went behind the shrub, and then it ended. Cut. Not frayed like animals chewed it. Cut clean like scissors. About a foot above the ground. The cut end was curled like it had been cut a long time ago and weathered. There was no plug. There was no way to connect it. I held the end in my fingers, turned it over, and I felt the copper inside. Cold. Dead. I took a picture and sent it to Denise. I said, "Cord is cut." She sent back, "Then what is turning on?" I did not answer because there was nothing to answer. I locked up, put the key back, and I drove away feeling stupid, like I'd been made part of a prank I didn't understand. I went on with my day. 2 more calls. A flickering porch light. A loose neutral in an apartment. Normal stuff. But all day I kept thinking about that warm key. I kept thinking about the clicking. And I kept thinking about the video where the lights came on full bright, like the house had power just for that. That night, I was at home eating a microwave burrito. The kind that burns your mouth. And I got a text from Denise at 6:05 p.m. Lights on again. Neighbors calling. "Can you go back tonight?" I stared at that text. I stared at the time. I looked out my own window at the streetlights coming on. My stomach did that slow sink. I typed, "Power is off. It's impossible." She typed, "They are on, please." I didn't want to go. I'm not a hero. I'm not brave. I'm a guy with a truck payment. I said yes because if you say no too many times, you don't get calls. I grabbed my jacket, the one with the torn pocket, and I drove back up there with the sky already dark and the neighborhood looked different at night. It always does. The same houses look like faces watching from the dark. The street was quiet, most people inside, and when I turned into the cul-de-sac, I saw it right away. Just the roofline. It looked like someone had decorated a dead thing and then only powered the outline so you could see its shape. I parked across the street because I didn't want to be right in front like an idiot. I got out, and the air was cold and still. You could hear distant highway noise like a low, constant hiss. I walked up, and I looked at the cut cord end behind the shrub. It was still cut, still open. No new connection. No fresh tape. Nothing. The lights were on anyway. I took my tester, and I put it near the cut end. No voltage. I checked again because my hand was shaking. no voltage. Yet the lights above were glowing. I'm telling you, dude. I felt my brain trying to solve it so hard it hurt. I walked to the meter. Still tagged. Still dead. I opened the panel. Still dead. I put my hand on the brick near the panel, and it felt warmer than it should have. Not hot. Just like the house had been holding heat even though it had no power. I walked back to the front door and the porch light was off. Total dark except for the glow spilling from the roofline. I unlocked the door and I stepped in with my flashlight. And the first thing I saw was that the tote of lights was not by the fireplace anymore. It was in the hallway. Like somebody had dragged it there. I stopped. I shined my light on it. Same tote. Same tangled lights inside. The lid still off. I had locked the door earlier. Windows were locked. There were no footprints in the dust because there was no dust. The carpet was clean, but I could see the tote had left a faint scuff line on the hardwood, a pale mark like it had been slid. I said, "Hello," because that is what you do even when you know it is dumb. No answer. I walked closer and the clicking started again above me. Click, click, click. Pause. Click, click, click. Same pattern. I looked up at the ceiling. Like that would help. The attic access hatch was in the hallway. One of those square pull-down things. It was closed. I could see the edge line. Nothing else. The clicking stopped when I moved. Then started when I stopped. Like it was keeping time with whether I was listening. I felt watched again. Stronger. I walked into the living room and I swept my flashlight across the walls, the empty corners, the fireplace, the bare mantel. And then I saw something on the tile near the kitchen entrance. A wet footprint. Just one. Like a boot had stepped there. But it wasn't my boot, because I had not gone into the kitchen yet tonight. I looked at my own soles. Dry. The footprint was wet, darker than the tile, and it had a pattern like a work boot. A little grit stuck in it. It looked fresh, like it had just been made. The wetness did not spread like a spill. It was the shape of a step. Crisp edges. I crouched and listened. I know how this sounds, but I put my finger near it, and the air above it felt cold, like the wetness was cold. I touched the tile next to it. Normal. I touched inside the footprint. Cold. It felt like touching the outside of a glass pulled from a freezer. I stood up fast and my head hit a little dizzy, and when I swung my flashlight back toward the hallway, the tote was closer. Not much. Like maybe a foot. Like it had shifted while my light was away. I could not prove it because it was so small, but I know what I saw. I backed up and I said, "No, listen. This is not." And I stopped because I realized I was talking like somebody was there. Like it was a person. It did not feel like a person. It felt like a system, like a routine that I'd stepped into. I forced myself to do the job, because that is my stupid coping thing. Just do the steps. Check the panels. Check the outlets. Document. I walked to the breaker panel, and when I opened it, every breaker was on. But there was still no power. I tested. Dead. I flipped them off, then on. Nothing. I left them off again, because that is what they should be in a vacant. I took pictures. I turned and walked back toward the living room, and the clock above the doorway, that plug-in clock, was running. Not right, but running. The hour hand was moving in little jumps, and the missing minute hand was there again. I swear to God it was there. A thin black minute hand. Sweeping too fast. It was not ticking once a second. It was sliding like someone pushing it. I stared at it, and the clicking above me matched it, like click, click, click. Pause. Click, click, click. And the minute hand would jump in little bites at the same rhythm. I stood there watching it, and I realized the minute hand was not pointing at real minutes. It was stopping on the same marks over and over, like it was drawing a pattern, like it was counting to something. I got this thought that didn't feel like my own. This certainty that if I stayed, something would finish. I stepped back toward the door, and my flashlight beam caught the front window, and for a second I saw a reflection that was wrong. The reflection showed me standing there, but behind me, deeper in the house, there was another shape, like a person standing in the hallway where the tote was. But when I turned, there was nothing. I swung back to the window, and the reflection was normal. I told myself it was my own shadow, but the shape in the reflection was taller than my shadow would have been at that angle, and it was standing still. I walked backward to the entryway, and I reached for the door handle, and the handle was warm again. Warm like skin. I grabbed it anyway, and I pulled the door open, and I stepped out, and I did not lock it behind me because I wanted to get away faster than I wanted to follow protocol. I walked down the porch steps, and I looked up at the roofline lights, and they blinked off the second my boot hit the walkway. Off. Instant. Like they were waiting for me to cross a line. I stood in the yard, breathing hard, and I looked down toward the shrub where the cord was cut, and I heard a soft sound from the grass, like something settling. I flashed my light, and there were the cut cord ends, but they were tied in a neat little knot. Not connected, just tied like somebody tied a shoelace. That was new. That was not there earlier. I did not do that. I'm telling you, I felt my throat go tight. I backed away, got in my truck, and I drove home with my hands gripping the wheel so hard my fingers ached. On the way, I kept checking my mirrors because I felt like the neighborhood was behind me, like it had stuck to my truck. I got home and I could not go inside. I sat on the steps and listened to my own house. Every little sound felt like that clicking. I finally went in and I turned on every light in my place, and I left the TV on with some dumb show just for noise. I tried to sleep on the couch, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw that minute hand moving wrong. The next morning, Denise called me. Not text. Called. And her voice was tight. She said the neighbors were furious. They thought someone was breaking in, and the owner's family was asking questions because apparently the previous owner had passed away in December 2 years ago, and the house had been sitting in probate and then got sold and then got shut off when the new buyer stopped paying. And the whole thing was messy. Denise said, "The neighbor says the lights come on at 6:02 every night. Every night. Like a timer." I said, "There is no power." She said, "Can you go back with someone? Bring a coworker." I told her no. I started to tell her about the tote moving and the clock, but I stopped because I heard how that would sound. So I said, "If you think someone is trespassing, call the police." She said the police had come already and found nothing, and they told her it was probably solar lights. And she said, "They are not solar, we checked." Then she said something that made my skin crawl. She said, "The neighbors said they could hear someone inside when the lights were on." She goes, "Colton, are you there?" I said, "Yeah, I'm here." She said, "Can you at least drive by tonight and confirm?" I said yes. Because again, truck payment, and also because some stupid part of me wanted to prove it could be solved. Like if I found a hidden battery pack, I could erase what I saw. All day I tried to act normal. I did a couple calls. I ate a sandwich in the truck, ham and mustard, and I kept tasting metal in my mouth, like I'd bitten a penny. I kept checking the time. At 5:55 p.m. I was already on that street, parked around the corner so nobody would see me. I sat there with my truck off, listening to the cooling ticks of the engine, and my hands were sweating even though it was cold. At 6:01 I drove into the cul-de-sac slow. The house was dark. No lights. At 6:02, I watched the roofline lights come on like a switch flipped. Clean, full, not even a ramp up. "On," I whispered. "No." Like that would change it. I got out and I stood in the street looking at it, and I noticed something I had not noticed before because I had been focused on the lights. The windows were not black. They were a little gray, like there was light inside. But not from lamps. More like the air inside was lit. Like the house had a dim glow from within. I walked up the driveway and I listened, and I could hear it. Footsteps. Slow. Steady. On tile. Not running. Not pacing. Just walking. Heel to toe. Heel to toe. Crossing a room. Then stopping. Then walking again. Like someone doing rounds. I stood at the garage door, my heart banging. And I told myself, okay, this is it. Someone is inside. You can call it in. You can solve it. I took my phone out and I started recording with one hand while my other hand held the flashlight. I walked to the front porch and I stopped at the door because I didn't want to go in. I'm telling you, dude, I did not want to. The footsteps inside stopped. Silence. Then the clicking started again above the porch, faint through the door. Pause. 3 clicks. I put my ear near the door, and I could hear a soft humming too, like electric hum. But there was no power. The handle was warm. I touched it and pulled my hand back like it burned, but it did not burn. It was just wrong, like a living warmth. I backed down the steps and I said out loud, I am leaving. Okay, I'm leaving. Like I was telling a dog. The lights stayed on. The house stayed quiet. I walked back to my truck, and when I opened the door, something slid across the seat like a small plastic thing moving. I froze. I shined my flashlight inside. On my passenger seat was a little white plastic clip, the kind used to attach Christmas lights to gutters. I did not have those in my truck. I do not decorate. I don't even own those clips. I picked it up with 2 fingers and it was warm. I threw it out onto the driveway like it was dirty. I got in and I started the truck and I backed out. And as I backed out, the roofline lights blinked off. Not gradually. Off. Like they were tied to my leaving. I drove a block away and parked, and I watched from a distance. But my recording was still running. I played it back with shaking hands. You could hear the footsteps. You could hear the clicking, and right near the end, when I opened my truck door, the microphone picked up a sound that I did not hear in the moment because I was focused on the clip sliding. It sounded like a voice, close, not loud, like someone speaking right behind the phone. It wasn't words like a sentence. It was like someone trying to say something but only getting the shape of it. Like breath-shaping syllables without voice. I listened over and over. I couldn't make out a name or a phrase, but it was there. It was right there. I sat in the truck until my legs cramped, then I drove home. And the whole way, I kept seeing that clip on my seat. I kept thinking, that clip came from the house. It crossed the distance. It ended up inside my truck with the doors closed. That is not a person prank. That is not a neighbor. That is not solar. That is something that moves things without opening doors. That night I got home and my own porch light flickered when I walked up. My porch light has never flickered. I stood on my steps and looked up at my roofline. And I do not have lights up there. But I swear to God I could picture them. Like my brain was laying an outline on my house. I went inside and I checked the time on my microwave, and it was 6:02. But it was not 6:02. It was late. I looked at my phone. It was 9:48. I looked back at the microwave, still 6:02. I unplugged it, plugged it back in, and it came back as 6:02 again, like it insisted. I turned on the kitchen light, and it made that relay click sound, and I flinched so hard I dropped my keys. I picked them up, and one key was warm. Not the whole ring, just one key, like it had been held. I went into the bathroom to splash water on my face, and when I looked in the mirror, for a second, the reflection did that wrong thing again, where the room behind me looked deeper than it is. I blinked, and it was normal. I'm telling you, I started doing stupid little tests to reassure myself. I checked every window lock. I checked every door. I looked under beds like a child. I sat on the couch and I kept the TV on because the silence made me hear footsteps that weren't there. Around midnight, I finally started to drift. And then I woke up on the couch and the TV was off and the house was dark, and my phone on the coffee table was lit with a notification that did not make sense. It was a calendar alert I never set. 6/2. That was the whole alert. No date, no event name. Just those numbers. I don't even use my calendar app. I grabbed the phone and swiped, and the alert disappeared. Then it came back again. Same. Then it came back again, like a loop. I turned the phone off, full power off, and I sat there breathing. And in the dark, I heard it. 3 clicks. Pause. 3 clicks. It came from my ceiling, not loud. Like a small relay in the attic. I live in a small place. The attic is just insulation and ductwork. There is nothing up there that clicks like that, unless the AC is cycling. And the AC was off because it was cold, and the thermostat was set low. I sat there staring at the ceiling, and I could feel my heart in my throat. I got up and I grabbed a broom handle because it was the closest thing, and I stood under the attic access and I listened. Click, click, click. Pause. Click, click, click. I tapped the ceiling with the broom handle. Not hard, just a tap, and the clicking stopped. I held my breath. I waited. Nothing. Then I tapped again and the clicking started again, like it responded to being acknowledged. I backed away and I sat down, and I didn't move for a long time because I had this feeling that if I moved, something would move too. I know how that sounds. I know. But that is what it was. Like a routine, a pattern, and movement was part of it. Eventually, the clicking faded, and I sat there until morning light came through the blinds. When it was bright enough, I climbed into my truck, and I drove straight to the supply store. Not for supplies, just because I needed to be around normal noise and people. I bought a pack of outlet testers I did not need. I bought a roll of electrical tape. I talked to the clerk about nothing. I laughed too loud. Then my phone buzzed. Denise again. Neighbor says lights turned on, even though you did not come. They stayed on longer. They heard footsteps. Police came. No entry. Please advise. I stared at the text, and I felt this wave of relief and terror at the same time. Relief because it meant it wasn't just reacting to me. Terror because it meant it was happening without me there too, like it didn't need me, but it noticed me. I typed back, I cannot advise. Do not send anyone alone. I sat in my truck in the parking lot, and I watched the clock on my dashboard. It was slow. It felt slow. Every minute felt thick. Wait, no, that's not right. It wasn't slow. It was like I couldn't hold on to it. Like my brain was skipping frames. I drove home and I parked, and I did not go inside. I sat in the driveway like a fool. At 6:01 p.m., my porch light was off, normal. At 6:02 p.m., my porch light came on by itself. It has a switch inside. Not a sensor. Not a timer. A switch. I didn't touch it. The light came on. I sat there staring at it. Then my living room lamp inside the window came on too. The one plugged into a wall outlet, and I had left the switch on it off because I was trying to be careful. It came on anyway. I got out of the truck and I walked up the steps slow, and the handle to my own front door was warm. I put my hand on it and I felt that same wrong warmth, like skin heat, like the metal had been held by a palm. I yanked my hand back. I stood there shaking, looking at my own door like it wasn't mine anymore. Then I heard it. Inside my house, footsteps on my tile by the entryway. Slow, heel to toe, like someone walking across a room. And no, I did not open the door. I backed down my steps and I got in my truck and I drove to my brother's place across town, and I sat in his driveway until he came out and asked what was wrong. I told him I was tired. I did not tell him. I couldn't, because how do you say? Christmas lights without power. A house that runs a routine at 6:02. A clip that appears on your seat. A key that stays warm, and then it follows you home and starts doing the same pattern in your own place. I stayed there until late, and then I drove back to my trailer because I had to, because my stuff is there, because I don't have money to be somewhere else. I turned on every light and I sat on the edge of my bed and I watched the clock on my phone. 5:59. 6. 6. 1. My hands were sweating. 6. 2. All the lights in my place blinked off at once. Every single one. Even the TV. Total dark. Then, above me, 3 clicks. Pause. 3 clicks. And then, from outside, from up near the roofline of my trailer, I saw a white glow spill through the thin curtains, like someone had turned on lights along the edge of the roof. I do not have lights up there. I never put any up. I don't even own a ladder. I sat there frozen, and I heard something drag lightly along my ceiling. Not a heavy scrape, more like plastic clips sliding across metal. And then the clicking stopped and the lights came back on inside like nothing happened. I ran outside with my phone light and I looked up and I saw them. Neat. Evenly spaced. Like someone had been careful. They were on. Bright. Clean. The cord ran down the side and disappeared behind my trailer where I keep my trash bin. I walked back there and found the end of the cord. Cut clean. No plug. Just 2 open ends curled like a smile. I stood there with my breath steaming, and I started shaking so hard I had to put my hand on the trailer wall to steady myself. The wall felt warm, like a hand had been pressed there. I went back inside and I tried to pull the curtain shut tighter, and my phone buzzed again. A calendar alert. 6/2. Then another. 6/2. I turned the phone off, and I sat here in the dark behind my trailer now, because I cannot be inside when it happens, and I don't know when it is going to happen again because time is not right anymore, and I keep catching myself looking at every clock and seeing 6/2 somewhere, like it's hiding in the corner of my vision. I called Denise and left a message telling her I'm done. I'm not going back to that house. And she texted me a final thing that I cannot stop thinking about. She said the neighbor finally spoke to the previous owner's sister. And the sister said the previous owner used to turn those roofline lights on at exactly 6/2 every night in December because that's when he got home from work. And he'd stand in the yard and stare at them like he was checking they were real. And then one night he did not come home, and they found him days later inside the house with the power off. And ever since, every December, the 6/2, the lights come on, whether there is power or not. And I'm telling you right now, I am not going to be here next December. I am not. I will leave this trailer. I will leave this town. Because it is not the lights that scare me the most. It is the routine. It is the way it keeps time. It is the way it moves small things like clips and keys and hands warmth, like it is practicing on easy objects first. And it is the way it brought the outline of that house onto mine, like it wants more roofs, more edges, more places to mark. I swear to God. Listen, if you live in one of these neighborhoods and you see a vacant house with neat white lights that come on even when the windows are black, do not stand there and watch. Do not walk up and touch the handle. Do not step over the line where the porch meets the yard, because it notices. And once it learns your timing, it starts keeping it for you, and then you are the one that starts turning on at 6:02, whether you want to or not. The empty highway bus. My name's Clayton Rusk. I'm from the little stretch outside Mentone, Texas, and I work as a roadside service tech for heavy trucks, mostly tires and batteries and fuel calls. The kind of work where you keep your hands warm by doing something with them. I'm saying this right now at 3 inches the morning behind my trailer because I can't get it out of my head and my wife is asleep and I don't want her hearing me talk like this, and I'm holding my phone up close because the screen's cracked and the sound cuts in and out, so if my voice jumps around, that's why. And also I haven't slept right since it happened. I swear to God I haven't. I keep thinking I'm calm, And then I remember a piece and my throat tightens up and I start talking too fast, like if I say it all at once, it can't catch up to me. That's stupid. I know, but listen. You asked for the truth. This is the truth. And it started so normal, I hate it. That day I had 2 eggs because that's what we had, and a piece of toast that got cold on the counter because I took a call while it was still in my hand. And I was wearing my brown work shirt with my name stitched on the chest, and that faint grease stain near the second button that never comes out. And I put on the same boots I always put on. Left boot first, because the right one pinches if I do it first. And I remember looking at the microwave clock and it said 6:11, and it felt like the day was already late. My shift was supposed to start at 7, but I get calls all hours and I still go in because that's the job. You know, you don't get to choose when a man's stuck on the shoulder. I drove to the yard, punched in on the little tablet we keep by the coffee machine, and it stamped me at 6:58, and I remember it because I was proud for once I wasn't late. I poured the cheap coffee, burnt smell, and I put too much creamer because I was trying to kill the taste, and my supervisor, Wade, looked up from his clipboard and said, "You got that county run tonight, right?" And I said, and he said, "Don't linger out there. Holiday traffic makes people do strange things." And I laughed, because that's the kind of line he says when he doesn't want to talk about staffing. And I said, "People do strange things every day." And he said, "No, I mean it." And then he went back to his clipboard like the moment was done. I'm telling you that because later I kept hearing his voice saying it, and I couldn't tell if he meant it for real or if my brain just wanted a warning label so bad it pasted one onto him after the fact. The run was simple. On paper, a string of calls along a rural highway. Little pull-offs. Little ranch turnouts. A couple of old oil service roads where folks still break down and pretend they don't need help until the cold gets into their bones. Colder than it usually gets out here. Not snow, just that dry bite that makes the air feel thin and mean. I had my truck stocked, charger packs, a spare air hose, a couple jacks, a box of road flares, a blanket rolled under the seat because I'm not young anymore and I learned the hard way. You can be warm at noon and freezing by midnight. I ate a gas station burrito around 2 inches the afternoon, not because I wanted it, but because it was there and it was cheap and it kept me from getting shaky. And I remember wiping my hands on my jeans and thinking I should stop doing that because it makes my jeans look like I don't know how to eat. And I remember that stupid thought because after everything, that's the kind of normal detail that still sits there like a joke. The first time I saw the bus, it was 17 inches the morning. And I know that because I looked at the clock on my dash, right before I looked back up and saw it. And when I looked back down again, it still said 17 like the minute had stretched tight and refused to move. I was on a 2-lane highway where the reflectors blink at you like little eyes when your headlights hit them. And there's a bus pull-off out there, not fancy, just a sign and a strip of gravel and a little bench that somebody built out of wood that's gone gray from sun. I've passed it 100 times. Man, I know it. I could tell you where the little dent in the signpost is. That night it was darker than it should have been, like the moon had given up, and I remember thinking the road looked like it went on forever without changing. Just the same line, same black, same nothing, and my tires sounded too loud, like the highway was empty enough to echo. Then there it was, a full-size bus, stopped clean in the pull-off, angled just right like it had parked with care, no hazard lights, no interior light I could see from the front. I eased off the gas because my first thought was somebody hit a deer or something and they pulled over. And my second thought was, why a bus out here? And my third thought was, I do not want this call. I do not want to deal with a bus because a bus means people and people mean complaints and complaints mean paperwork. And I was tired. I slowed to a crawl and I looked for movement through the windows and I saw nothing. No silhouettes, no heads, no glow of phones, just rows of dark glass. I rolled past it about a truck length and I told myself, keep going, Not your business unless you're called. And then, man, the bus door opened. It opened smooth, like air pressure. Like a normal bus. No squeal, no struggle. Just that clean swing. And the steps inside were lit. Just those steps, like a little rectangle of light laid down on the gravel. And there was no driver. I don't mean I didn't see him. I mean there was no shape behind the wheel. No shoulder, no arm, nothing. The front seat area was empty. I swear to God, empty. I felt my hands go slick on the steering wheel, and I told myself, maybe he's standing outside. Maybe he stepped down and you didn't see him. Maybe he's taking a leak behind the bus. That's what men do out on the highway. So I pulled over on the shoulder a little ahead, turned my own hazards on because that's what I'm supposed to do, and I sat there a second, listening to my engine idle and listening for anything else, like voices, like footsteps, like a door slam. Nothing, just the low hum of my truck and that thin wind you get out there that sounds like it's scraping over the world. I got out anyway because I don't know how to not do my job, and the gravel under my boots sounded wrong, too crisp, like it was amplified. I walked back toward the bus with my flashlight in my hand even though my headlights were already hitting it. And the beam shook because my hand was shaking, and I was mad at myself for that because I'm a grown man and it was just a bus. As I got closer, I could see the steps lit like they wanted me to come up. The inside of the bus was still dark beyond the first row. I called out, "Hey, y'all okay? You need help?" And my voice sounded small, like the dark ate it. No answer. I walked right up to the open door, and I looked inside and I smelled something that made my stomach flip. Not rotten, not smoke, just wrong. Like cold upholstery that's been closed up too long and something metallic. Like pennies on your tongue. I shined my flashlight toward the driver's seat, and it hit the steering wheel and the dashboard. And there was dust. Man. Dust like the bus hadn't been driven in months. But the engine sound wasn't there at all, and there was no heat coming off it, and the steps were lit anyway. I leaned in and I said again, "Hello," and I tried to keep my voice normal. And that's when I saw the fare box. There was a receipt paper roll hanging out of it like somebody had tried to pull a ticket and left it half torn. That's what made it feel real. That tiny stupid detail. I reached up without thinking and I tugged it and it tore clean. And I held the strip in my hand and my flashlight fell on the print, and the print was faded like old thermal paper, and it said 217, just that. No date, no route, just 217. I backed away from the door because something in me wanted space, and as I backed away, the door started closing. It didn't slam, it didn't rush, and the steps light went out, and for a second, the bus was just a big dark shape, and then my headlights flickered. Just a quick dip, and when they steadied again, the bus was gone. Not pulled away, not turned. Gone. The pull-off was empty, just gravel and that gray bench and the signpost. I stood there with my flashlight pointed at nothing, and my heart was banging so hard I could feel it in my throat. There was nowhere for it to go, man. No side road right there. I walked to where the bus tires had been and I expected tracks in the gravel, because a bus in gravel leaves tracks. But there were no tracks. It was like it never sat there, except I was holding that little receipt strip in my hand. I looked down at it and it felt like a joke someone was playing on me, and I told myself, "Clayton, you are tired. You are seeing things. You probably saw a bus further down and your headlights did something and you mixed it up in your head." And I started walking back to my truck, repeating those thoughts like a man repeating a prayer. Locked the doors, even though that's silly out there. And I sat with the receipt strip in my palm, and I watched my dash clock. It still said 217. I watched it until my eyes hurt. I watched it until I felt tears starting. And I hated that. I hated that it was making me feel like that. And then the clock clicked to 218. Like nothing happened, like it was satisfied it had made its point. I drove away, and I didn't call it in because what would I say? And I didn't tell Wade because he'd make a face and then he'd look at me different, and I don't want that look. I got through the rest of that shift like a man walking through water, slow and heavy, and every time my phone buzzed, I jumped like it was going to be that bus calling me. When I got home after sunrise, my wife asked why I was so pale, and I told her the coffee was bad. That's what I told her. Bad coffee. Later, in the afternoon, I pulled that receipt strip out of my shirt pocket because I'd stuck it there like some kind of proof, and it had gone blank. The thermal print was gone like it had never been there. It was just a white strip of paper. I stared at it a long time, and I kept rubbing my thumb over it like the numbers would come back if I warmed it up. They didn't. That should have been the end of it. A weird moment. A tired night. But it didn't stop there. And that's the part that makes me sound like I'm making it up. And I'm not. I swear to God, I'm not. The next night, it was there again. Same pull-off. Same angle. Same time. I know because I started checking the time like I was bracing for impact. I was driving that stretch later on purpose because I told myself I needed to prove it wasn't real, that it was my brain being stupid. And I hate that I did that because it means I walked toward it again with my own feet. At 2:17, the bus was there, like it had been waiting for the minute to arrive. The door was closed this time. No lights. I slowed, and I rolled past. And I looked in the windows, and I still saw nothing. But as my headlights washed over the side, I saw something taped to one of the windows near the front. A piece of paper. Like a handwritten sign. I stopped ahead again. Hazards on again, because my body was doing the same steps like it was trapped in them. I got out, and the air felt even colder than the night before, like it had been stored somewhere deep and brought out just for me. I walked back and I kept my flashlight low because I didn't want to see it too clearly. I know that sounds dumb, but that's how it felt. Like the clearer it got, the worse it would be. I got close enough to read the paper on the window and it said, in blocky, shaky letters, "Do not knock." And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking somebody put that there as a prank, but who, man? Who is out there at 2:17 putting signs on a bus that isn't supposed to exist? I stood there staring at the words and I felt my breath go too fast. And I whispered, "Okay, okay." Then my phone buzzed in my pocket and I almost dropped it, pulling it out because my hands were numb. The message said, "You were late." I stared at it and my mouth opened and nothing came out. And I looked at my dash clock through the windshield of my truck and it said 2:17. I looked back at the phone and the message was still there. "You were late." I typed back, "Who is this?" And I hit send. And it didn't show delivered. It just sat there. And then the phone screen went dark, like the battery died. Except it was fully charged. I had charged it in the truck cradle. I hit the button and nothing happened for a second. Then it came back on. And the text thread was gone. Like it never existed. I searched my messages while standing there in the cold, scrolling like a man looking for a lost receipt, and there was nothing. I felt my eyes sting. Not from tears. From wind? That's what I told myself. And I looked back at the bus window. The "Do not knock" sign was still there. Then the bus door opened. Again. Smooth. Clean. Steps lit. No driver. And from inside, just beyond the lit steps, I heard a sound like someone breathing through their nose. Slow and patient. Like they were waiting and not in a hurry. And I froze so hard, my back hurt. I didn't knock. I didn't step up. I backed away without turning my back fully. Because my body remembered every warning movie I ever saw, even though this wasn't that. And as I backed away, the breathing sound stopped, like it had noticed my decision. I got in my truck, locked the doors again, and I sat there shaking. And I kept my eyes on the bus, and I told myself, I'm not looking away. I'm not, because the first night it disappeared when my headlights flickered. I sat there and watched, and nothing moved. And then my dash clock clicked to 2:18, and my headlights dipped just for a heartbeat, and the bus was gone again. Not pulled away, gone. And when I got home, my wife said I smelled like cold metal and asked if I'd been fixing a battery leak. And I went into the bathroom and I looked at my face and it didn't look like mine. My eyes looked too wide, like I'd seen something bright. And there was a little red mark on my knuckle, like I'd bumped it. And I could not remember bumping it. I stood at the sink and I tried to replay my night and I kept hitting a blank spot like a skipped track. I didn't even tell Wade. I did what I always do. I swallowed it and I kept going. Because that's what working men do. We swallow things. The third time, I wasn't alone. That's important. Because for weeks after, I kept wondering if my brain was making it and if having someone else there would snap it back to normal. I asked my coworker, Lyle, if he wanted to ride along on a stretch because I told him I wanted company, and I made a joke about holiday boredom, and he said, "Sure, man, as long as we grab food," and we did. We got chicken strips from a place that keeps them under a heat lamp too long, and he ate them like he didn't care about his insides, and he talked about his kids' school play and how he didn't understand the songs, and it was so normal I almost believed I'd dreamed the bus. I didn't tell him about it until we were close to that pull-off, because I didn't want him winding himself up, and also I was ashamed, because if you tell another man you saw a driverless bus that disappears, you are asking him to look at you like you can't be trusted with a wrench. As we got near, I started sweating even though the cab heater was on low, and Lyle noticed and said, "You okay? You look like you got a fever." And I said, "I'm fine." And he said, "No, for real, your face is shiny." And I said, "Just tired." Then the clock on my dash hit 2:16, and I felt my stomach drop. I said, "Listen, I gotta show you something." And he said, "What?" And I said, "Just watch the pull-off up ahead." And he said, "What pull-off?" And I said, "The bus stop pull-off." And he laughed and said, "Man, nobody takes a bus out here." And I said, "Just watch." At 2:17, the bus was there. I saw it in the beam and I made a sound I didn't mean to make, like a cough, and Lyle went quiet. He leaned forward in his seat and said, "What the?" And then he stopped himself, because he doesn't curse, and he looked at me like he wanted permission to say the rest. And I said, "Yeah." He said, "That bus wasn't there last week." And I said, "It's not always there." And then I realized what I said, and I hated it because it sounded like I'd been meeting it. The bus sat there, angled, perfect. The door was open already, steps lit. Lyle said, "Is the driver asleep?" And I said, "Look at the seat." I pulled over ahead, hazards on, same routine, and Lyle said, "Clayton, you are not going up there." And I said, "I'm not. I just need you to see it." And he said, "I already see it, man." And his voice was thinner than normal. We got out together, and the cold hit us like a slap, and we walked back side by side, our boots crunching on gravel. As we got closer, Lyle slowed down, like his body was trying to stop without him deciding. He said, "Do you hear that?" And I said, "Hear what?" And he said, "Like a radio, like a station between stations." And I listened, and I heard it too. A faint hiss with a pulse under it, like something trying to form a pattern. The bus steps were lit, and beyond them, the inside was dark. I pointed my flashlight at the driver's seat, and it was empty. Lyle shined his light too, and the beams crossed and made the dust in the air sparkle like little points. And I realized there was dust floating in the doorway, like the inside air was stale. Lyle said, "This is a dead bus." And I said, "Yeah." And then I felt ridiculous, because what does that even mean? He stepped closer to the open door, and I grabbed his arm without thinking and said, "Do not go up." And he jerked like my hand burned him, and he said, "Why? What happened?" And I said, "It disappears." And he said, "What do you mean disappears?" And I said, "It just goes. Like you blink and it's gone." And he stared at me, and then he looked back at the bus like he was trying to decide if I was pulling him into a joke. Then a voice came from inside the bus, low and flat, not loud, but clear, like it was speaking right into our ears. It said, "Only one." Lyle's eyes went wide and he whispered, "Did you hear that?" And I whispered back, "Yes." The voice didn't sound like a person leaning forward to talk. It sounded like it came from everywhere inside at once, like the bus itself had a mouth. Lyle said, "Who's there?" And the voice said, "Only one." And then the breathing started. That slow, patient nose breathing. And I swear to God my legs went weak. Lyle backed up fast, bumping into me, and he said, "Clayton, get in the truck. Now." And I said, Yeah. And we hurried back, and neither of us ran, because running feels like admitting panic. But we moved fast. We got in, locked the doors like that mattered, and Lyle said, Drive. And I drove. And my hands were shaking so bad the truck swayed in the lane for a second, and I corrected it. In the mirror, I saw the bus still there. Door open, steps lit, like it was watching us leave. Lyle kept twisting around to look, and he said, I glanced back at the mirror and the bus was gone. Lyle made a sound like he'd swallowed wrong, and he said, No. And I said, I told you. We drove in silence a long while, just the road noise and our breathing, and then Lyle said, What is that? And he held up his phone. The screen was lit with a missed call notification. The caller ID said Clayton Rusk, my name. He stared at it like it was poison. He said, Your phone never rang. I checked my phone. No missed call. No outgoing call. He held his phone closer to me, like if I looked at it hard enough it would explain itself. I said, I didn't call you. He said, It says you did. Then his phone buzzed and a text came in. Same thread, from my name. The message said, Next stop. Lyle's lips moved, but no sound came out for a second. He said, I did not touch it. Another message came. Same time. Another one. Same door. Then the screen went black. Not dim. Black. Dead. He pressed the button and it wouldn't come on. He slapped it against his palm like that helps. Nothing. Then, 2 miles down the road, it turned on by itself, bright. And the lock screen showed the time. 2:17. I looked at my dash. 2:19. I looked back at his phone. 2:17. Lyle whispered, That is not right. I said, No. And that's when he started breathing fast, and he said, Clayton, I feel like I left something back there. And I said, What? And he said, I don't know, like a piece of me. And then he rubbed his arms like he had goosebumps. We didn't talk about it at the yard. Men don't talk about that kind of thing under fluorescent lights with other men walking by. But when I went to my truck after clocking out, my passenger door was cracked open, just a finger width. And I know I locked it. I know I did. Inside, on the seat, was a small strip of thermal paper, like from a fare box. Blank at first glance. I picked it up and felt the cold of it in my fingertips. I held it under the yard light, and as it warmed in my hand, faint gray numbers bled up from the paper like bruises. 2:17. Under it, one more line. Lighter. Only one. I dropped it like it was hot, and it fluttered to the floorboard. I looked around like somebody was watching me, and I hated myself because I was in a bright yard and still felt watched. I picked it up with 2 fingers, shoved it into my glove box, and I told myself I'd throw it away later. I didn't. I couldn't. It felt like proof. And also, it felt like a hook. That night, When I got home, my wife was wrapping gifts on the floor, and she looked up and said, "You're early." And I said, and I laughed because I thought she was joking, but the clock on the stove said 5:42. That made no sense because my shift ended at 7. I checked my phone. 5:43. I told her the yard had an error. I told her we got cut loose early. She shrugged because she trusts me. I went into the bathroom and I looked at my face again. My cheeks were red, like I'd been out in wind, which I had, but my eyes looked wrong, like they didn't match the rest of me. I checked my work tablet logs the next day at the yard because we can pull the record. It showed I clocked out at 5:39. It showed I completed my last call at 4:58. That was impossible. I argued with Wade about it without telling him why it mattered. I said the system was wrong and he said, "It's not wrong, Clayton, it's synced." And I said, "I was on a call at 6:30. And he said, "There was no call at 6:30. And he stared at me like he was waiting for the rest of the story. I didn't give it. I just stood there with my jaw tight, and then I walked away before my voice did something I couldn't control. The next few nights, I avoided that stretch. I told dispatch I had a stomach issue. I swapped routes. I made excuses. Lyle stopped riding with me. He wouldn't say why, but I saw him flinch when someone mentioned buses on a TV in the break room, and I saw him check his phone like he didn't trust the time on it. I tried to convince myself it was done, that the bus was a weird holiday thing, some prank, some broken down vehicle that someone moved, but it didn't fit. Nothing fit. Then, on the night before Christmas, I got a call I couldn't refuse. A stranded family vehicle, rural turnout, same highway, farther down, but on that same line. Dispatch said the caller sounded scared, said they were low on fuel and cold, and it was one of those calls where if you don't go, you're not the man you say you are. I told myself, you can go and not look at the pull-off. You can keep your eyes forward. You can do your job and come home. The highway was emptier than usual, like everyone had decided at once to stay inside. The sky was clear and black, and the stars looked hard, like nails hammered into the darkness. I kept glancing at the clock without meaning to, like my eyes were pulled there. 2:12, 2:13. My hands started sweating. My throat felt tight. I told myself, breathe. 2:14. I passed a mile marker that I recognized because it had a bent top like it had been hit. I tried to keep my eyes on the center line. 2:16. I told myself, do not look, do not look. At 2:17, my headlights caught the bus anyway because it was sitting farther out than usual, slightly in the lane like it wanted to force my attention. And I looked. I couldn't not look. The door was open, the steps were lit, and there were shapes in the seats. Not clear faces, just the suggestion of bodies sitting still. My stomach turned, and I heard myself whisper, no, even though I was alone in the cab. The radio in my truck, which I never turn on at night, clicked on by itself with that hiss between stations. And under the hiss, I heard a faint pattern like a voice trying to speak through water. I reached to turn it off and my hand stopped mid-air because my phone buzzed in the cradle and the screen lit up with a call. Caller ID. Clayton Rusk. My own name. I stared at it like it was a snake. The phone kept buzzing. The screen kept flashing, and I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. I didn't answer. I didn't. I swear I didn't. The buzzing stopped, and immediately a text came in from the same thread that shouldn't exist. It said, last night, then another, same time, then another. Well, open door. I could feel tears starting, and it made me angry because I wasn't trying to cry. It was just my body reacting like it was about to fall off a ledge. I drove past the bus without stopping. I kept my speed steady, like if I acted normal, it would leave me alone. As I passed, I saw the sign on the window again, taped in the same spot, "Do not knock." And beneath it, another piece of paper I hadn't seen before, smaller. It said, "You did anyway." My chest tightened so hard, I thought for a second I was going to pass out. I kept driving. I kept driving. I told myself, get to the call. But the road started feeling wrong, like it wasn't moving under me the way it should. The mile markers stopped matching. I passed a marker that should have been 5 miles later, too soon. And then I passed it again, the same bent top, the same scuffed numbers, like the highway had looped back on itself without turning. I said out loud, "No, wait, that wasn't right. That was earlier when..." And I couldn't even finish the sentence because my brain was trying to stack the moments, and they wouldn't stack. The dash clock said 2:24. I checked my phone time, 2:17. It wouldn't change. It was stuck on 2:17 like it had decided that was the only time allowed. The truck felt like it was driving through a tunnel even though there was open land on both sides. The stars looked fixed, not sliding the way they should when you move. I got a cold thought, sharp and stupid, that the world had paused and only my truck was allowed to move inside the pause. Then I saw the pull-off sign again ahead. And the bus was there again, like I had never passed it, like I was being brought back to it no matter what I did. This time the shapes in the seats were clearer. They were sitting upright, facing forward, still. No phone glows, no movement, just waiting. The steps were lit, and the breathing sound was loud enough I could hear it through my closed windows, slow and patient, like it was right outside my door. My phone buzzed again. A text. Only one, then another. Next stop, then another. Open door. My hands were shaking so bad the steering wheel vibrated. I tried to keep going, but my truck slowed like something was dragging it. Like the road had turned to thick mud without looking like it. I pressed the gas. The engine revved, but the speed didn't climb. I looked in the mirror, and for a second I thought I saw headlights behind me. Then I realized it was the bus interior lights reflecting off my own rear glass, like the bus was close enough for its light to reach me, and that made my stomach drop because it meant it wasn't sitting still anymore. No. And my voice cracked. The truck shuddered, and then the engine cut. Just cut. The dash lights stayed on. The radio hiss grew louder. The truck rolled to a stop on the shoulder all by itself, like it had been guided. I sat there, gripping the wheel, breathing fast, and the cold in the cab felt sudden, like the heater had died. The bus was behind me now, pulled in close, door open, steps lit. The breathing sound was steady. My phone lit up with one more message. Knock. I didn't move. I couldn't. I stared ahead at the road like it could save me. Then, man, my hand lifted on its own. I don't know how else to say it. My right hand came off the wheel and reached toward the door handle like it was following an instruction my brain hadn't approved. I whispered, "Stop." And my hand kept moving. I grabbed my own wrist with my left hand and squeezed hard enough to hurt, and I said, "No, listen, no," and I pulled my hand back like I was wrestling myself. Tears were running down my face and I didn't wipe them because I couldn't spare a hand. Outside, the breathing stopped. For a second, there was silence so pure it felt like pressure. Then I heard a sound on the side of my truck. 3 soft taps. Not on the window. Lower. Like on the metal door. Tap, tap, tap. My whole body went cold. The taps came again. Same rhythm. Impossible precision. Tap, tap, tap. Then, from somewhere behind me, inside the cab, even though the doors were locked, a voice said, in that flat, clear way, "Only one." I turned my head slow toward the passenger seat, and there was a strip of thermal paper sitting there. Just sitting there like it had been there the whole time, and on it, faint gray numbers that looked like they'd been warmed up by my fear. 217. Under it, last night. Under that, I made a sound like a whine, like a hurt animal, and I squeezed my eyes shut hard, and I said, I'm telling you, I'm not doing it, and I kept them shut because I couldn't stand to see what happened next. I heard the bus door hiss like it shifted. I heard something on the gravel, not footsteps exactly, more like a weight being moved, a shuffle that didn't have the right pattern for legs. My truck rocked slightly like something leaned against it. Then the taps came again, but higher, right where my head was, on the window. I kept my eyes shut and I shook my head like a child. Then I felt my own knuckles move. My right hand lifted again, this time toward the window, like it wanted to tap back. I clamped it down with my left and pressed it to the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. I whispered, please, and I don't even know who I was asking. The tap stopped. The breathing started again, closer, like right outside the glass, and then, in the quiet, I heard my own voice, coming from outside, right beside my driver window, saying my exact words from earlier that week, my exact tone, like a recording played back wrong. It said, hey, y'all okay? You need help. My stomach dropped so hard, I thought I'd be sick. My own voice repeated, softer, like it was trying different volume settings. Hey, y'all okay? You need help. I opened my eyes just a slit because my body had to know, and in the side mirror I saw nothing. No face at the window. No person. Just darkness and the faint glow from the bus steps. But the voice came again, now closer, right at the glass. I swear to God, man, I swear, it was my voice. It said, don't linger out there. Holiday traffic makes people do strange things. That was Wade's line. But it came out of my mouth. My brain did this awful flip like it was trying to find ground, and there was none. Then my phone buzzed one last time. The screen showed a new message, from none. The message said, After Christmas, and then the bus interior lights flared bright for half a second, like a camera flash, and my headlights dipped, and my truck engine roared back to life without me turning the key, and my dash clock jumped forward like it had been held and then released. It went from 2:24 to 3:41 inches, one blink. My phone time changed too, finally, like it had been allowed to move again. I started the truck moving without thinking, just letting my foot do it, and I did not look back. I drove to the call location and there was nobody there. No stranded vehicle, no family, no hazard lights, just an empty turnout and tire tracks that looked old. I sat there a long time with my hands on the wheel, shaking. Dispatch called my radio and asked why I'd gone off route, and I tried to answer, and my voice cracked, and I said, and their normal tone made me want to scream, because how could they be normal when the world had just done that? I finished the shift like a man in a fog. When I got home, it was daytime, later than it should have been, and my wife said, Clayton, where were you? You didn't come home? And my stomach went cold because in my mind I had come home every morning. She said, you missed Christmas Eve dinner at my sister's. I told them you got called out, but I didn't hear from you. And I said, that's not right. And she said, it is right. You left the house 3 days ago and you have been gone. I laughed because it was the only sound my mouth could make, and I said, no, I was here yesterday. And she stared at me like I was playing a cruel joke. And she said, Clayton, yesterday was Christmas Day. I felt the room tilt. The date said December 26. I kept staring at it like it was lying. My work tablet log showed 3 nights of calls completed, but I couldn't remember doing most of them. I had receipts in my glove box for food I didn't remember eating. My brown work shirt had a fresh stain on the cuff like it had been brushed against something wet, and no matter how many times I washed it, the stain stayed, like it wasn't on the fabric, like it was under it. Lyle came to my trailer 2 days later, unannounced, and he stood outside like he didn't want to step in. He said. He swallowed hard and he said, "It stopped." I said, "What stopped?" He said, "The time." He said his phone kept showing 2 to 17 on and off all day Christmas, like it would freeze and then catch up, freeze and catch up, and he said his kid asked him why he kept staring at the microwave clock, like he was waiting for it to talk. I told him about the 3 days, and his face went pale and he said, "I lost time too." He said he went to bed Christmas Eve and woke up and it was December 27. And his wife was furious and he had bruises on his shins like he'd been kneeling and he didn't know where. He said, "Clayton, I think it only wanted one of us, but it took pieces from both." And when he said that, I felt sick because it sounded true in a way I couldn't explain. After Christmas, the bus never showed again. I drove that highway in daylight, in early morning, at dusk, at midnight, trying to prove the world was normal, and the pull-off was always empty. The signpost was there. The bench was there. Gravel, weeds, normal. But sometimes my dash clock will hesitate when I pass that spot, just for a heartbeat. Like it wants to settle on 217 and can't because the day won't let it. And every now and then, late at night, I'll get a vibration on my phone, like a message came in. And when I check, there's nothing. But the screen will show the time wrong for a second, like 217 flickering in the corner, before it corrects, and I'll feel my hands go sweaty like I'm back on that shoulder with the engine dead. I don't work that route anymore. I told Wade I needed different coverage, and I blamed my back. And he didn't argue. He just looked at me for a long second and said, "Good," like he understood more than he should. I don't stop at pull-offs at night unless I have to. I don't answer unknown calls at 2 inches the morning. I don't even like looking at buses in town, like at a school, because the door hiss makes my stomach clench, and I catch myself counting the seconds between breaths, like I'm listening for that patient nose breathing. And the worst part is the missing 3 days, because I keep thinking maybe I did knock. Maybe I did. Maybe that's why the paper said you did anyway. Maybe I'm telling myself I fought it because that's the only version where I get to stay me. But I don't know. I don't have those days in my head. They're just gone, like the bus was gone. And I keep finding little things that don't belong. Like I opened my toolbox last week and there was a small plastic token in there. Smooth on one side, ridged on the other, like something you'd feed into a fare box, and it wasn't mine, and it wasn't Lyle's, and nobody at the yard claimed it. And when I held it in my hand, it felt colder than the air around it, like it carried its own temperature. I threw it in the trash behind the shop, and when I came back the next day, it was in the cup holder of my truck. I stared at it until my eyes watered. I haven't thrown it away again. It's sitting in my glove box right now under the blank strip of thermal paper I kept like an idiot. Sometimes at night, when the trailer is quiet and the heater clicks and the neighborhood dogs stop barking, I swear I can hear 3 soft taps on the side of the trailer wall. Not loud, not a bang, just tap, 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 and I will hold my breath and wait for it to happen again, because if it happens again, it means it's still out there counting on me. And if it doesn't happen again, I still don't relax because I'm listening for the moment it decides to start. I'm telling you this because you wanted something that feels real. I hate that it is. I hate that the most exact detail I can give you is the time, because it's the time that won't let me go. 2:17. It sits in my head like a splinter. And listen, if you're ever on a rural highway in December, and you see a bus where it shouldn't be, and the door opens clean and the steps light up like an invitation, do not stop. Do not knock. Do not look for the driver. Keep going. Keep your hands on the wheel and your eyes on the road, and do not check the time, because I swear to God, the moment you respect that minute, it learns your name. The knock after the freeze. My name's Colby Rains. I'm from out by Gervin, Texas, and I work as a night shift maintenance hand at a water transfer pump station. Listen, I know how this is going to sound. And I swear to God I would not be sitting behind my trailer at 3 in the morning talking into a cracked phone if I had any other way to get it out of me. But I cannot hold it in anymore. Man, I cannot. I have not slept right since late December, since that freeze came through West Texas like it was mad at the ground itself. The day it started was normal. That is what keeps getting me. How normal it was. I woke up before noon because I had the night shift, and I always try to sleep in. But the wind was tapping my bedroom window, and it was that dry, tight kind of cold, where your nose feels like it is stuck together inside. I ate 2 eggs and a tortilla that had been in the fridge too long, and I drank coffee that tasted like the plastic of the pot because I never clean it right, and I wore the same dark work shirt I always wear, the one with the little stitched name patch that just says Colby in faded white. It has a stain on the lower front from hydraulic fluid, a yellow-brown smear that never comes out. And I remember looking at it while I stood at the sink and thinking I should get a new shirt because that stain makes me look like I do not take care of myself. That is what I was thinking about, not fear, not anything like that. I punched in at 6:41 p.m. I remember because I had to redo it twice on the time clock, and the second time it took and the numbers sat there in green like a little promise that the night was going to be the same as every other night. It was supposed to be 3 hours of walking the pad, checking gauges, making sure nothing was vibrating loose, listening to motors hum, and then the long quiet stretches where you just sit and scroll your phone and drink gas station coffee until a call comes in. That is what my life is, man. Work, trailer, work, trailer. I rent this place in a little trailer park outside town, not the kind with a gate and landscaping. Just a dirt loop road and numbers on posts that do not make sense. My trailer is supposed to be 14, but the post says 17. And the mailboxes are in a row that skips from 12 to 15, like somebody got tired halfway through painting. I am telling you this because it matters. The way things are already a little off out here. Like the world is loose around the edges, but you ignore it because you are tired and you do not have money for better. That evening when I left for work, the sky was pale and hard, and there was frost on the ground in places that usually never hold anything wet. And the older guy across from me was wrapping a tarp around his porch like it was going to save him from the cold. I nodded at him. He nodded back. Nobody said anything. Because, in the cold like that, talking feels like wasting heat. I drove to the station. The roads were empty, the kind of empty you only see when the weather scares people into their houses. And at the pump station, the wind made the chain link fence sing a little. Not loud, just a thin whining, like a bad bearing. The motors were running fine. Everything was fine. I did my rounds. I wrote down the numbers. I kicked a couple of rocks out of the way so I would not trip later in the dark. And I sat in the little control room with the heater blowing hot air that smelled like dust. Around 9:30, the radio crackled with a message that some lines were down south of us. Power flickering in spots. And the guy on dispatch laughed and said, "This freeze is going to make people act like the world is ending." I laughed too. No, wait, that was not when it started. That was still normal. It started later. When I got home, I got off at 4:12 a.m. I remember because the relief guy was late, and I texted him, and he did not answer. And then he finally rolled in at 4:12 and said his truck would not start. I drove back with the heater in my truck blasting my face and my hands still cold, because cold like that gets into your bones and stays. When I pulled into the trailer park, the streetlight at the entrance was flickering. Not on-off like a normal flicker, but like it was trying to decide if it wanted to exist. It would glow half bright, then dull, then half bright again. I parked, I walked up my little steps, and I noticed the air smelled sharp, like metal, like when you touch a battery. Inside my trailer, it was warmer than outside but still chilly, and my thermostat said 61. I set it to 68 like I always do. I took my boots off by the door, and I hung my work shirt on the back of the kitchen chair. I always do that. I do not fold it. I just drape it. The stain faces outward like it is showing off. I made ramen, the cheap kind, and I ate it standing at the counter because sitting down feels like giving up. Then I went to bed. I slept until about noon, and when I woke up, the power was out. Everything was dead quiet. No fridge hum, no heater, no little buzz from the charger I leave plugged in. The only sound was the wind pushing against the trailer and the faint rattle of something outside, probably somebody's loose trash can. I sat up and listened, and I remember thinking, okay, this is annoying, because when the power goes out here, sometimes it is for an hour, sometimes it is for a whole day, and nobody tells you anything. I got up, I put on sweatpants, I turned on my phone flashlight, and I walked around checking things like that would do anything. The thermostat screen was blank, the kitchen clock was blank, the microwave was blank. I stood in the living room and felt my breath come out as a small cloud, and I thought about going to the gas station in town to charge my phone if it got low. The sky was bright, but the light felt wrong, like it was not warming anything. The sun looked like a coin behind thin haze. The ground had that crunchy frost layer, and the trailer park was quiet. Nobody outside. No kids. No dogs. Just that stillness that comes when everything is frozen and people are inside holding their heat. It was 3 knocks. Not loud, not soft either. Just firm, like somebody rapping their knuckles on the door to let you know they are there, without being rude. I froze. That is the truth. I froze like the cold got into my muscles. The knock came again. 3 knocks. Same pace. Same spacing. I said, "Yeah, who is it?" Because that is what you say, but my voice sounded thin in my own living room. No answer. I walked up and looked through the little peephole. Nobody. Just my porch and the empty dirt road and the neighbor's trailer across the way. I opened the door fast, like I could catch somebody walking away, and there was nothing. No footprints. The frost was unbroken. I stood out there in socks and felt the cold bite my toes. I looked left and right. No one. I shut the door. I told myself it was the trailer settling, or maybe ice in the frame, because things knock when they shrink and expand. I have heard weird sounds in trailers before. They pop, they ping, they creak. That is not new. What was new was that it knocked like a hand. No, wait. I forgot to tell you. It was not just the knock. Right after the second set of knocks, my living room felt colder, like a pocket of cold air slid through even though the door had not been open. I stood there and I watched my breath and I told myself I was being stupid. I went to the kitchen. I opened the fridge out of habit, and the smell was already starting to change, like food getting warm. I cursed in my head, but I did not say anything out loud because I do not talk to myself like that. I found a candle in a drawer, one of those cheap ones somebody gave me, and I lit it. The flame made the trailer feel smaller. The shadows looked thicker. I sat on the couch with my coat on, scrolling my phone, checking the weather, checking messages. People were posting about the freeze, about pipes bursting, about power out all over. Somebody posted a picture of their faucet dripping and said they were leaving it running so it would not freeze. I got up and turned my faucet on a thin stream. The water looked gray in the candlelight. I sat back down. I watched my battery percentage like it was a heartbeat. The day crawled. The trailer got colder. I could feel the cold coming up through the floor in spots, like the ground underneath was breathing it up. Around 4 p.m., I heard the knock again. 3 knocks. Same pace. I sat up straight, phone in my hand, candle flame flickering. I did not move for a second. Then I stood and walked to the door and put my hand on the knob. The knob was cold enough to hurt. I looked through the peephole. Nobody. I opened the door anyway. Nothing. Frost unbroken. I shut it. I locked it. I stood with my forehead against the door, listening, like I could hear someone's breath outside. Nothing. Then I heard it again, but not on the door. On the wall. Behind me. 3 knocks. Same pattern. But this time it came from the hallway wall that leads to my bedroom and bathroom. I turned around so fast I got dizzy. I stared at the wall like it was going to show me a hand pushing through it. The knock came again, and I swear to God, I felt the vibration through my hand, like someone was on the other side of the wall, and they wanted in. There is nothing on the other side of that wall, except my bedroom closet and then the outside. It is not a shared wall. There is no neighbor there. It is just my own space and then the world. I backed away. I said, "Stop," without thinking, like I was talking to a dog. Then I laughed at myself, because who says stop to a wall? I told myself it was the trailer settling again, but my stomach had that heavy feeling like when you realize you forgot something important and you cannot remember what. The power stayed out. The temperature outside dropped as the sun went down. The knock came every time the trailer got colder. Like a math problem you cannot unsee once you see it. When my phone said it was 39 outside, no knock. When it said 34, knock. When it said 31, knock. Always 3. Always the same spacing. Like it was timed. Like somebody was waiting for the air to hit a certain point. I started checking the weather app and then waiting. And I hate that I did that, but I did. I would sit there with the candle and my coat and my phone, and I would watch the temperature drop, and my chest would tighten. And then right when it hit a certain number, knock, 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 then nothing. If the temperature held steady, no knocks. If it dropped again, knocks again. It was like it was tied to the cold, like the cold was a switch. Around midnight, the power came back for a few minutes. The heater kicked on hard, blowing dusty hot air. The fridge hummed. The lights came on, and I felt this wave of relief like somebody had put a blanket around my shoulders. I turned off the candle. I charged my phone, and I stood in the living room letting the heat hit my face. Then the power cut again. Everything died. The heater stopped in the middle of its breath. The sudden silence was worse than the cold. The knock came, but this time it was not 3. It was 6. 2 sets of 3, back to back, with a pause between, like a code, like a correction, like it was saying, "You noticed me now, so I will adjust." My heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I stood in the hallway and listened. The trailer made its normal noises, little pops, little creaks. But underneath those, there was a different sound, a low tapping like fingers drumming on something hard. It moved. It started near the front door, then it was on the hallway wall. Then it was in the bathroom, like it was traveling along the inside of my trailer without walking. Like it was just appearing where it wanted. I sat on the floor in the living room with my back against the couch because sitting low made me feel safer, like if something came through the door it would not see me. That is stupid. I know that is stupid. I sat there anyway. At some point I fell asleep for a minute, because I remember waking up with my chin on my chest and my neck hurting and the candle still burning low. I sat up, panicking, because I am not the kind of guy who misses work. I checked messages. Nothing. No missed calls. That did not make sense. My supervisor would have called. Dispatch would have called. Somebody would have called. I got up and tried to call out, but my phone had no service. Just that little spinning thing like it was searching. The power was still out. The knock came again. 3 knocks, and then another 3 on the wall, and then another 3 from somewhere inside the bedroom. I do not know how else to say it. The next day, the power came back around late morning, and I told myself I was done with it. I told myself I would leave. I would go to town, get coffee, charge everything, maybe sleep in my truck somewhere warm, maybe stay with a buddy. But when the heater kicked on and the lights came on, the trailer looked normal again. My brain did that thing where it tries to smooth everything over so you can survive. I took a shower, I shaved, I ate cereal. I even laughed at a video on my phone. I told myself, it was stress. It was cold. It was lack of sleep. I texted my supervisor and said my power was out and I did not have service and I was sorry. He texted back and said, "You are fine, man. Roads are bad anyway. We got it covered. Stay safe." That made me feel worse because it meant nobody noticed my absence like it mattered. I went outside and looked around in daylight. Everything looked normal. Frost on the ground. Sun weak. The dirt road through the park had tire tracks. A dog barked somewhere. The older guy across from me waved at me like nothing happened. I wanted to walk over and say, "Did you hear knocks last night?" But I did not. I did not want to be that guy. I went to my truck and started it. The engine turned over rough, but it started. I sat there with the heater blasting, and I told myself I was leaving for a while. Then my phone dinged. A weather alert. Temperature dropping again overnight. I stared at the alert and felt that heavy stomach drop again. It was like the alert was not for the weather. It was for the knocking. Like it was warning me when it would come. I drove to the gas station in town, the one on the edge where truckers stop, and I sat in the parking lot with other people doing the same thing, charging phones, getting coffee, warming up. I talked to a guy I know from work, Brent, and he said his pipes had frozen and he had been melting them with a hairdryer. He laughed like it was a joke. I asked him if he had heard any strange knocking in his house. He looked at me like I was asking if he saw a spaceship. He said, "Nah, man, just my water heater popping. You staying warm?" I nodded and lied and said, "Yeah, just fine." I went back to my trailer before dark because I kept thinking, if I am not there, something will happen. That is the part that makes me feel sick, that I felt like I had to be there. I brought extra blankets. I bought a little battery lantern. I bought more candles, and I filled my truck with gas like I might have to leave fast. The power stayed on that evening, and the heater ran, and the trailer felt almost comfortable. I tried to pretend it was over. I cooked beans in a pot. I ate them with chips. I watched a show on my phone, and I almost fell asleep on the couch. Around 11:48 p.m., the heater stopped. Not because I turned it off. It just stopped like it had been unplugged. The lights were still on. The fridge was still humming, but the heater went silent, and the air in the trailer immediately felt colder, like somebody opened a door to outside. I got up and checked the thermostat. It was lit. Then the knock came. 3 knocks. On the inside of the vent. That is what it sounded like somebody knocking on the metal duct from inside it. I stood there with my hand over the vent, and the knocks came again. I got on my knees and looked into the vent slats with my phone flashlight. Just darkness. Dust. Nothing. Then, as I was staring, the heater kicked on, blasting hot air like it had never stopped. The knock stopped immediately, like the heat shut it up. I stood up slowly. My mouth was dry. I walked to the front door and put my hand on it, feeling for cold. I tried to tell myself it was pressure in the duct, something shifting, but I have lived in this trailer for 2 years. I know its noises. That was not a trailer noise. That was a knock. A hand knock. At 12:19 a.m., the power flickered. Lights dimmed. Heater stuttered. Knock. 3 knocks on the front door. I ran to the door and yanked it open, and again there was nobody. But this time, there was something on my porch. A thin line, like somebody had dragged the tip of a key across the frost on the porch railing. It was not deep, just a mark. It made no sense. I touched it and the frost crumbled under my finger, and the mark was right there under it, like it had been made after the frost settled. I closed the door and locked it, and I sat on the couch with my shoes on, because I did not want to be barefoot if I had to run. I swear to God, I sat there like that for hours, watching the thermostat, watching the weather app, listening to every little sound. The knocks came when the heater stopped, or when the power dipped, and every time the heat came back, the knocking stopped. It was like the cold invited it, like the cold gave it permission. At around 2:40 a.m., I heard knocks from under the floor. Not the normal creak of the trailer settling, but knocks. 3 of them, coming up through the linoleum, like somebody under the trailer was knocking on the underside with a knuckle. My skin crawled. I stood up and looked down at the floor like I could see through it. The knocks came again, and I felt them, not through my feet, but through my teeth. That sounds crazy. I know, but it felt like the knock traveled through the air and into my jaw. I walked to the kitchen and grabbed the biggest flashlight I have, the one I keep for work, and I went to the back door. I opened it and stepped out into the cold. The air hit me like a slap. The trailer park was dark except for a few porch lights, but my breath was thick in front of me. I shined the flashlight under the trailer. The beam caught on pipes, insulation, dirt. No person. No animal. No footprints, because the ground under there was mostly dry dirt. But I saw something that made my stomach turn. There were marks on one of the support blocks, like little smudges, like someone had pressed fingers into dust. 3 smudges in a row. I leaned closer. The smudges were not dusty. They were wet, like condensation, like breath. Under my trailer. I backed up so fast I hit my head on the door frame. I went inside and locked the door, and I sat on the floor again, this time with the flashlight in my lap like a weapon. I texted Brent. I said, "You up?" He did not answer. I texted again. I said, "I need you to answer." Nothing. I called, straight to voicemail. I checked the clock. It said 3:03 a.m. I remember thinking, okay, it is happening at 3. That is a thing people say. 3 in the morning. I hated that my brain went there. I hated it. I wanted it to be anything else. I sat there and listened. The knocks came again, but this time they came from different places at once. 3 on the front door, 3 on the hallway wall, 3 under the floor. It was like I was inside a box and somebody was knocking on every side of it to see if it would break. The heater was still blowing, but it sounded far away, like the sound was coming from another trailer. I stood up and walked to the hallway slowly, flashlight shaking in my hand. My heart was pounding. I opened the bathroom door. Nothing. I opened the closet door. My work shirts hung there, stiff from cold air. The back wall of the closet had those thin panel seams. I stared at them. Then I heard the knock. 3 knocks, right behind that panel, right where the closet wall meets the outside. I put the flashlight up close, and I saw the panel flex slightly inward with each knock, like something on the other side was pressing. I stepped back. I shut the closet door hard. I locked it, which is stupid because it is a closet, but I did. I went back to the living room and sat on the couch with my knees up like a kid. I do not sit like that. But I did. I kept telling myself, as long as the heater stays on, it cannot happen. That became my whole plan. Heat equals safe. Cold equals knocks. I kept the thermostat high. I even turned the oven on and opened it like people do when they are desperate, even though I know you are not supposed to. Sweaty warm, but I did not care. Then the power went out. Not a flicker. Full out. Like somebody cut it at the pole. All at once, the heater stopped. The lights died. The fridge went quiet. The whole trailer went cold in one breath. The candle I had lit was the only light, and its flame bent sideways like there was a draft, even though the doors were shut. Immediately, the knocks started. Not 3s. A long sequence. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock, knock. Over and over, like a metronome. Like it was counting. I covered my ears. That did not help, because the sound felt like it was inside my skull. I grabbed my phone and it would not turn on. even though it had battery. I pressed the button. Nothing. I shook it. Nothing. I swear to God, it was like the cold in the trailer shut my phone down. I ran to the front door and put my hand on the lock, and I heard knocks on the inside of the door, not outside, like a knuckle hitting the inside panel from inside my own trailer. I pulled my hand back. I stumbled backward. The knocks moved. They went to the kitchen wall. Inside. Then to the bathroom door. Inside. Then to the bedroom wall. Inside. It was like the sound was walking around my trailer without anyone walking. The candle flame flared and then went low, and the air got so cold so fast that my breath came out in big clouds. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and I backed into the corner of the living room by the little bookshelf because it felt like the strongest corner. Like if the trailer was going to get crushed, that corner would hold. That is crazy. I know it is crazy. I was thinking in animal thoughts, not logic. The knocking slowed. It became 3 knocks again, but the 3 knocks were not on the door. They were on the ceiling above me. 3 knocks right above my head, like something standing on my roof, knocking down. I stared up at the ceiling panel. The panel had a little water stain near the light fixture. I stared at that stain like it was an eye. 3 knocks again, then another 3. Closer, like the knocking moved across the ceiling. I heard the little pop of frost shifting on the roof, and then I heard something else, something that made my skin go numb. A soft dragging sound, like a hand sliding across the ceiling panel from the inside. Not nails, just the flat part of a palm. Slow, deliberate. It stopped above my bedroom door. 3 knocks. Then the bedroom door handle moved, not rattled by wind, turned. Slow. Like someone on the other side was testing it. I had locked my bedroom door earlier without thinking. It clicked as the handle tried. Then it stopped. Silence. I stood there shaking so hard my teeth clicked. I whispered, "Please stop." And I do not know who I was talking to. I hate that I said please. I hate it. Then I remembered Brent. I thought, I need someone else here. I need a witness. I grabbed my keys and I ran to my truck, barefoot in the cold, blanket dragging behind me like a cape. I tried again. The battery was weak from the cold. Of course it was. My breath fogged the windshield. I looked up and saw my trailer in the dark, candlelight flickering in the window like a signal. Then I heard the knock, not from the trailer, from inside my truck. 3 knocks on the back window, right behind my head. I spun around so fast I almost hit my face on the headrest. The back seat was empty. The rear window was fogged with my breath. But on the outside of the glass, there were 3 clear circles, like someone had pressed fingers there and melted the frost. 3 clear spots in a line. I screamed. I did. No words, just a sound. I am not proud of it. I threw the truck door open and I ran back toward the trailer because, as crazy as it sounds, the trailer felt safer than the truck because the truck had just become part of it. I got inside and slammed the door and locked it and leaned against it, chest heaving. And the trailer was so cold my eyes watered. The knocking had stopped. That was the worst part. When it stopped, the silence felt like it was listening to me breathe. I stood there and waited for it to start again. It did not. Instead, I heard a single knock. Then another. Slow. Not a pattern, like somebody knocking to get my attention. One at a time, with long gaps. Like it was patient. Like it knew I was trapped. I stood there until my legs started cramping. Then I did something I still do not understand. I walked toward the closet. I do not know why. Maybe because not knowing was killing me more than knowing would. Maybe because part of me thought, it is a possum. It is a rat. It is something that got into the wall. I put my hand on the closet knob. The knob was warm. The trailer was freezing. The knob felt like it had been held in a hand. I jerked my hand back. I stared at it. Then I grabbed the knob again and yanked the door open. The closet was dark. I shined my flashlight inside. I saw the broom, the mop, the filters stacked, a plastic jug of cleaner. Normal. Then I saw something on the floor of the closet. My work shirt, the one with the stain. Hanging in there earlier, not in this closet. It was folded neatly, like somebody had taken time. The stain faced up. I just stood there, staring. I swear to God my ears rang. I reached in and touched the shirt. It was cold. But under it, the closet floor was wet, like someone had spilled water. I pulled the shirt out, and the wetness was not water. It was frost. And in that frost were 3 marks, like knuckles pressed down, 3 circles. I backed away and the closet door swung shut on its own, slow, like it had a soft close hinge. It does not. It slammed shut at the end, hard enough to make the wall shake. 3 knocks followed immediately, from inside the closet door, like something knocked back at me after shutting itself in. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed my phone again, and it turned on like nothing. The screen lit up. Battery was fine. Time said 6:06 a.m. I blinked. That did not make sense. It had been 3:03 when I texted Brent. I checked my messages. My texts to Brent were not there. Not failed. Not sent. Just gone. I checked the call log. No calls. Like I never tried. I checked the weather app. It said it was 28 degrees outside. It had been lower. Or maybe it had not. I do not know. I looked at the stove clock even though the power was out. It was blank. I looked at my microwave. Blank. The only time was my phone. I stared at it until my eyes blurred. Then I heard the knocks again, but softer now, like someone tapping their nail on something. And I realized the sound was coming from inside my phone speaker. A faint triple tap, repeating, like the knocking had moved into the device. I turned the phone over. The tapping continued. I turned the volume up and down. It did not change. I put the phone on the counter and backed away. The tapping continued. 3. Pause. 3. Pause. Like a heartbeat. Then my phone buzzed with a notification. A voice message. From my own number. I opened it, hands shaking. The message length said 012. I pressed play. I heard my own voice, but it did not sound like me. It sounded like me, speaking from far away, like through a wall. And underneath my voice, you could hear the knocking. 3 knocks. Then my voice said, in a flat tone, "Colby, open the closet." Then the message ended. I dropped the phone. It hit the linoleum and bounced, and the screen cracked. The knocking in the trailer stopped. Not because something would tear me apart, but because my brain would break and I would do something stupid, like open something I should not open. I grabbed my keys and I grabbed my jacket and I ran out the front door. The cold hit me hard, but I did not care. He opened it a crack, face suspicious. I said, "My power is out and I need to come in for a second." He looked past me at my trailer. His eyes narrowed. He said, "You hear it too." That stopped me. I said, "Hear what?" He did not answer. He opened the door wider. His trailer smelled like kerosene and old coffee. He had a lantern lit. He had blankets piled on the couch. He said, "Sit down." I sat. My teeth were chattering. I told him my name. He told me his name was Earl. He said he had been in that park 15 years. He said when the cold hits a certain way, you do not answer knocks. He said it like it was a rule. I said, "What knocks?" He looked at me like I was slow. "Always 3. And if you opened, you would lose time." He said he opened once, years ago, and he woke up in his bathtub with all the taps running and his truck keys in the sink, and his porch light unscrewed and sitting on the steps. He said he never opened again. My stomach turned. I said, "Why does it knock?" Earl shrugged. He said, "It is just checking." "Checking what?" He shrugged again. He said, "Checking who is still warm." That sentence made my skin crawl. I sat there listening to the lantern hiss. Then we heard it. 3 knocks. Not on Earl's door. On my trailer. Across the dirt road. I could hear it through the thin walls of Earl's place, like the sound carried straight. Earl's face tightened. He stared at the floor. He whispered, "Do not go." I stood up anyway because I could not stand, not knowing what was happening in my own place. Earl grabbed my arm. His hand was hard, strong. He said, "Listen to me, boy. You go over there and you let it get you alone. You will not come back right." I laughed. A short, ugly laugh. And I said, "I am already not right." Earl did not smile. He said, "Then stay and wait for daylight." I sat back down. We waited. The knocks continued across the road, always in 3s, sometimes faster, sometimes slower, but always 3. It went on for what felt like hours. Earl stared at the lantern like it was the only thing holding the world together. At one point, the power came back in the park, and a few porch lights flicked on, including mine. The heater in my trailer kicked on, and immediately the knocks stopped. Earl let out a breath like he had been holding it all night. He looked at me and said, "You see, heat stops it. Cold calls it." I nodded. My hands were shaking. Earl said, "When the power goes and the cold comes, it comes to see who will answer." He said the park used to be a different layout, older trailers, different road, and a fire came through years ago, and they moved things around, and the county never updated the map. He said if you look at the park on paper, it still shows trailers that are not there. He said people hear doors shutting where there are no doors, footsteps where there's just dirt. He said he once saw a porch light come on in an empty spot, lighting up nothing. He said the knocks are part of that, like the park trying to remember itself. I sat there listening, and part of me wanted to believe him because it was almost a normal explanation, like the place was broken in a way that could make sense. But then my phone buzzed again in my pocket. I pulled it out. Another message. From my own number. I looked at Earl. He shook his head like he knew. I pressed play. My own voice, flat, distant, with knocks underneath, said, "Colby, you left something in the closet." Then the message ended. Earl's eyes went to my face. He said, "It is talking to you now." I said, I did not answer. He said, "You opened. That is answering." My stomach dropped. Earl told me to throw the phone away. I could not. It was my phone. I know how that sounds. But it was my phone. It had pictures of my mom. It had my work schedule. It had everything. Earl said, "It is not yours anymore." I put the phone on his counter like it was a dead animal. It buzzed again. Earl picked it up with 2 fingers and set it outside on his porch like he was putting out trash. Then he shut the door. The buzzing stopped. We sat in silence until daylight, and when the sun finally came up, pale and useless, Earl walked me back to my trailer. The heater was running. The inside felt warm, normal. My stomach still felt like it was falling. Earl stood on my porch and said, "You clean out your freezer, and you keep your heat on, and you do not answer knocks." I said, "Okay." He said, "And you stop living in 17 that is not 17. He pointed at my post. He said, "You are in a spot that is not on the map right. That is why it came to you." I laughed again, but it was not funny. Earl walked back to his place without looking back. I went inside and tried to pretend everything was okay. I checked the closet where I had found my work shirt. The closet was normal. No frost. No wetness. My work shirt was on the kitchen chair where I always hang it. The stain faced out, like it had never moved. That made me dizzy. I sat down hard. I looked at my phone. It was gone. I realized I had left it on Earl's porch. I went back out to get it. It was not there. I asked Earl. He opened his door and looked at me with tired eyes. He said, "I told you, it is not yours anymore." I said, "Did you throw it away?" He shrugged. He said, "It went where it goes when it gets cold." That sentence kept me up for weeks. I drove into town and bought a new phone that day. Different number, different everything. I told my supervisor I lost the phone in the power outage. He laughed and said, "This freeze is taking everybody's stuff." I laughed too. I tried to make my life normal again. I worked. I slept. I ate. But every time the temperature dropped at night, every time the heater cycled off and the trailer got quiet, I would sit up in bed, heart pounding, waiting for 3 knocks. Some nights, nothing happened. Some nights, it happened once. 3 knocks on the front door, and then silence. I never opened. I never spoke. I kept the heater high. My electric bill got stupid. I did not care. I started sleeping with the TV on low, not for the show, but for the sound, because silence felt dangerous. I started leaving lights on, even though it wasted power, because darkness felt like an invitation. Then in early January, after the freeze broke for a few days, I started thinking it was fading. I started thinking maybe Earl was right. Maybe it was just the park, just the cold, just some weird thing that happens and you learn the rules and move on. Then I lost 3 days. I do not know how else to say it. I went to work on a Tuesday night. I remember because I ate a chicken sandwich from the gas station and it was too dry. And I remember telling Brent at the station that I could not stop thinking about knocks, and he laughed and said I was watching too many scary videos. I remember punching in at 6:39 p.m. I did my rounds. Everything normal. At 11:15 p.m., dispatch called and said there was a low-pressure alarm on one line, and I needed to check it. I drove the back road out to the site. The road was empty. I remember thinking, good, not low enough. The gate was open. It is never open. It has a chain and a lock. I stopped the truck and stared. The chain was hanging loose, like someone had unhooked it. I got out and walked up. The lock was still on the chain, locked, but the chain was not around the gatepost anymore. It was like somebody had unlocked the gate without unlocking it. I stood there in the headlights, breath coming out white, and I heard 3 knocks. Not from the gate, from inside the little control shack. 3 knocks on the metal door. I froze. I told myself, no. I told myself, it is not here. But the knocks came again. 3. Same spacing. I backed up. I got in the truck. I called dispatch. No answer. I called again. No answer. The radio was dead. Just static. I looked at the temperature. It said 34 now. It had dropped. That did not make sense. It should not drop that fast. Then my truck heater stopped blowing. Not because I turned it off. It just stopped. The cab got cold fast. I heard 3 knocks on my truck door from the outside, like someone was right there. I looked. Nobody. I heard 3 knocks again, but this time from behind me, on the back of the cab. I grabbed the steering wheel so hard my hands hurt. I started the truck again even though it was already running. I put it in reverse. The headlights swept across the site, and for 1 second, I saw something in the shack window. Not a face. Not a person. Just a dark shape like someone standing too close to the glass. Then the lights flickered and the shape was gone. I reversed fast, tires crunching gravel, and I turned around and drove back toward the main road. As I drove, my dash clock glitched. It jumped from 11:22 to 1:08 and back to 11:23. My stomach turned. I drove faster. I swear to God the road got longer. You know those back roads out here? You drive them all the time. You know every curve, every dip. That road kept going. The same fence line. The same mesquite shapes. The same reflective markers repeating like I was looping. I said out loud, no, 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 because talking felt like pushing back. The temperature dropped again. 33. Knock, knock, knock. Faint. Like from inside the dashboard. I hit the gas harder. The truck felt heavy, like it was pulling something. Then my headlights caught a sign. The same sign I had passed 10 minutes earlier. A faded speed limit sign with a bullet hole. Same sign. Same hole. I swear to God. I slammed the brakes. The truck stopped. The engine died. Total silence. My breath fogged the windshield. Then 3 knocks came from the passenger seat window, right beside my head. The window was fogged, but there were 3 clear circles on it. I screamed again. I started the truck. It started on the first try like nothing. I drove with my eyes wide, not blinking. And eventually the road ended where it was supposed to end. I saw the highway lights. I almost cried. I drove back to the station. The station was empty. Nobody. The control room lights were on, but no one inside. I walked in, calling out. My voice echoed. The clocks on the wall were wrong, all different times. The radio hissed. I looked at the computer screen. It was on, showing a date. Friday, not Tuesday. I stared at it. My mouth went dry. I pulled out my new phone. It had service. It showed Friday. I checked my calendar. 3 days had passed. I checked messages. There were messages from my supervisor. Where are you? Are you okay? Call me. Then a message from Brent. Man, you better not be messing around. Then nothing. I called my supervisor. He answered on the first ring, voice tight. He said, "Where have you been?" I said, "I have been at work." He said, "No, you have not. You clocked out Tuesday night and nobody has seen you since." I said, "I did not clock out." He said, "The system shows you clocked out at 11:24 p.m. Tuesday." I said, "That is impossible." He said, "Colby, listen to me. If you are on something, you need to tell me right now." I said, "I am not. I swear to God I am not." He said, "Then you need to come in and talk to me." I went in. They looked at me like I was a stranger. My supervisor kept asking where I had been, and I could not answer because I did not know. Brent would not look at me. He kept staring at my hands like he expected to see blood or something. I did not have blood. I did not have any marks. I had my work shirt on. The stain was there. But my shirt smelled like cold smoke, like a fire had been near it. My supervisor said they checked my trailer park. Earl said he had not seen me in days. I drove home after the meeting. The trailer felt wrong. Not haunted, just wrong. Like the air inside had been changed. The heater was off. The thermostat was blank. The power was out again, even though the rest of the park had lights. My trailer was dark. I stood on my porch and stared at my door. Then I heard the knock. 3 knocks. From inside the trailer, like something standing in my hallway, knocking outward on my front door. My knees went weak. I did not go in. I turned around and walked to my truck and drove to a motel in town. I sat in the parking lot with the heater blasting, and I watched my breath, and I told myself I was done. I rented a room. The room smelled like bleach and old carpet. I kept the heat on high. I sat on the bed in my clothes, staring at the door. Around 2 a.m., the heater cycled off for a moment, and the room got quiet, and I heard 3 knocks on the motel room door. I held my breath. The knocks came again. Same spacing. I did not move. I did not answer. Then I heard 3 knocks from inside the bathroom. On the mirror. I covered my mouth to stop myself from making a sound. I sat there until the heater kicked on again, and the knocks stopped. Heat stops it. Cold calls it. That rule followed me. I do not know what it is. I do not know what it wants. I do not know where my 3 days went. I moved out of that trailer park 2 weeks later. I did not tell Earl where I was going. I did not tell anyone. I found a small place in a different town. A little duplex with thicker walls. And I thought it would end. It did not. It got quieter. But it did not end. On nights when the temperature drops and the heater hesitates, I hear it. Not always on the door. Sometimes in the vents. Sometimes under the floor. Always 3. Sometimes my new phone will buzz with no notification. And if I put my ear to it, I swear I can hear faint tapping like a knuckle on plastic. I started sleeping with a space heater in the bedroom, even when it is not that cold. I keep the whole place too warm. I wake up sweating, heart racing, because sweat feels safer than cold. I flinch when someone knocks on the door during the day. I do not answer the door unless I am expecting someone, and even then, I look through the peephole until my eye hurts. I stopped taking night shifts when I could. I told my supervisor I had anxiety. I think this Fano. He nodded like he understood, and then he stopped calling me for extra hours. Brent avoids me now. Earl. I have not seen him since I left. Sometimes I drive past that trailer park during the day, just to prove to myself it is real, and I see my old spot, and there is a different trailer there now, a newer one. Sometimes I see somebody sitting on the porch, bundled up, smoking, looking bored. I want to pull over and yell, "Keep your heat on. Do not answer knocks." But I do not. Because what if it is not about the park? What if it is about whoever notices? What if by telling them, I make it look their way? I am telling you now because I cannot keep it inside my head anymore. I am sitting behind my trailer, the one I am in now, not the old one. And I keep looking at my back door because I swear I heard a faint triple tap through the wall a minute ago. And it is not even freezing tonight. It is only cool. But the air feels like it did that first day. Sharp, like metal. And man, I keep thinking about that voice message from my own number, the one that told me to open the closet. And I keep thinking, what if I did open the wrong thing that night, and I do not remember? What if those 3 days were me answering in some way I cannot undo? And now it knows my rhythm. It knows my heat. It knows when I try to sleep. And it is just waiting for the next freeze, the next time the power dips, the next time the world goes quiet enough for 3 knocks to mean something.